like the new member Korean direction right now with like Jonathan falling out, like repeatedly calling out separately in that Nancy's main elected in method for like I'm just like Jonathan right now won't be hearing any more voice of Nancy anymore. It's like that for like the time being is definitely my Korean pressure. Definitely that dream from Nancy precisely uh as that like monster from like the battle what had seen Nancy. At that point, that scream of Nancy's like which Jonathan heard might have been solely due to like that precise like portal in the tree precisely remaining open during that not being like fully closed during that time would be like sole reason for like Jonathan even being able to like hear Nancy's like scream from like the battle but even at that point. It's definitely my favorite. So like definitely right now with like Jonathan frantically searching and calling out for Nancy's name right now. By now definitely like that portal in like the tree would have totally been fully closed by now. It's definitely my favorite. So like right now, no matter how much like Jonathan would be screaming Nancy's name, I'm just like Jonathan not hearing any more voice of like Nancy at all. For the time being, it's definitely my favorite impression. So and definitely my Korean person is also that like parents sensing also getting that like this like opening up like the portal in like that way like that Amber Spring was totally only possible for like the monster solely due to that time right now will be precisely 8 o'clock, especially when it's very first. So for like the monster to be able to like move from like the real world to like the parallel and definitely switching to my Korean person also that like from in between like the free and like the acrobat like I'm looking specifically my person that like all the human except for 11 would be like the acrobat while 11 as well as like the monster would be definitely in the free definitely my person and they would be like having like the power to like travel between like the real world as well as like the parallel world precisely during 8 o'clock definitely my person example like even 11 as well might be precisely able to like open up like the portal to like the parallel world precisely during 8 o'clock. 11 as well will be totally having that power. That's definitely my better impression. So, and I'm also trying like even like the very first scientist that basically in like the very beginning who got captured by the monster. Like I'm also trying like that as well. During that exam, specifically my first impression that the scientist might have only let out 11 and made 11 secretly might have only made 11 do like the experiment and like we might have it might have been solely due to like 11 cells that scientist might have been able to like open up like the portal to the parallel world and even that incident might have happened precisely during 8 o'clock. Definitely my perspective. Definitely my perception right now is that it both Will's disappearance as well as like Barbara's disappearance. Right now, both the like it would have not all happened through like basically like these monsters like traveling through electrical sources through like the light bulb of appearing out of like the electrical light bulb and basically affecting Will and affecting Barbara might have actually not happened. What might have actually not be what might have happened is certainly my perspective. It would be exactly like how in Nancy's case, like Nancy's case as well like basically right now with like the whole portal opening up in like the three I'm considering like precisely during 8 o'clock like I'm considering there will be definitely that like energy spike happening in like Brenner's laboratory. This is my personal impression. I still be like and I'm considering like the between like the free and like the acrobat like I'm considering maybe like neither 11 nor even like these monsters would be that absolute perfect free that would be able to like precisely be able to like travel between like the parallel world and the real world and the real world and the parallel world at any time is definitely able to represent like there would be like conditions that would be like that would need to be satisfied in order for even for like the monsters to be able to like travel from like the parallel world to like the real world. And that condition I'm preparing will be most likely that the very impression that like that condition would be precisely that like it would need to be precisely 8 o'clock for like the monsters to be able to like travel. Especially it should take for like the monsters to be able to like take advantage of like the energy spike which will be most likely happening especially at 8 o'clock in like Brenner's energy laboratory for like the monsters to be able to like travel from like, the real world to like the from like the battle world to the real world is the same with frameworks and so like my question to impressions that like after Will's affection and also going like it might have been either that very same monster or like it might have been like a different monster. Definitely, this is like the parallel world is like completely dark, like but different. Like definitely, first of all, like the monsters would be like totally having like that you kind of like an energy within them that would be like totally affecting all light sources like nearby. It's definitely my opinion. So like this way, like I was definitely like the parallel world would be totally fully dominated by these monsters, and these monsters might have like wiped out like the majority of like human existence in like the parallel world. It's certainly my representation. This would be like the just like these monsters would be having that unique kind of like an energy which within them which would have like the side effect of like affecting light sources. And this might have been how like the entire thing, including the three like the town of Hawkins in like the parallel world. I don't that would be like uh, that would be dark, but like the entirety of like the parallel world, entirety of like, the world in like the parallel world would be totally dark and would be totally like dominated by the monster creatures and by a great number of monster creatures, and like the majority of like, the humans in like the parallel world might have been wiped out by these like monsters. Especially my first impression. So my secondary impressions were like as to like how exactly like the monster might have precisely affected and taken will to like the parallel world would be especially through that precise area in that shed outside of like Wings home where like Hopper had in like the very beginning in his like stuff for like the precise shed in which like Hopper had inspected and had thought he had heard a rustling sound like basically that's the precise location in like kind of like a corner like area of like the shed might have been precisely where like the precise monster might have taken and abducted will and taken will to like the battle world very precisely in that area where like Hopper had thought he had heard the rustling sound there. Rustling sound might have been precisely the that very same monster that might have abducted will like trying to like get back into like the real world. Might have been the cause of like that rustling sound. So like participant that portal might have that might have been like precisely behind all those like objects or like items that were present like that were piled up and present in like that shed like from which like Papa has thought to turn some things out like beneath that like I'm assuming like the what might have been happening might have been like the portal opening up and basically the alien I mean like the monster trying to like infiltrate back into like the real world but like I'm also like that not being possible for like the aliens solely due to like the time not being 8 o'clock of the cinema thing. So like I'm also like exactly like how like the science teacher in like Hawkins has talked about like the real world according to like the Hawkins science teacher like the like thing saying like the real world is like on the top and like the parallel world the dark parallel world being beneath it like darkly under like and with like the huge quantity of energy that's like even more than humanly possible. Only being able to like according to like the officer, only being able to like literally fold like the paper through which like the by the inserting of like the pen through like the paper like the passage of like from like the real world and parallel world being possible. Like I'm possible that right now like the process situation would be like the paper being in like the folded like stage only through like the entire feet of like the town of Hawkins alone. It's definitely my favorite. But then I'm also like definitely for enough like energy laboratory like after like especially my favorite impressions that what might happen would be like in the very beginning that that scientists might have only used 11 to like of and like with like 11 like exceptional superpower like the energy produced within like super energy laboratory might have been amplified by 11 to the extreme that like would move that way solely due to like 11 superpower like that energy might have in like run of laboratory at that point might have been gotten amplified beyond beyond like the quantity of energy that's like humanly possible definitely my opinion. That way like I was putting with it from energy lab like a huge portal might have opened up initially through lab 11 cells definitely my opinion. And from that huge portal like I was putting this monster might have totally straight away noticed like the portal and might have my person to reaction and for like the multiple possibilities that I'm going to potentially like either that scientist in like the very beginning was attacked by like the monster he might have totally gotten affected and taken into like the parallel world while like another like since like the portal that opened up due to like 11 power within like the energy laboratory might have been so extremely huge that like maybe another monster might have without much delay showed up into the energy laboratory to like which bottle. And even then, like 11 might have been scared and hiding, but like that monster might have not been able to might have not detected like 11, so like not found 11, so like that monster might have escaped from like energy laboratory through like the whole pipe from energy laboratory through which like 11 eventually had escaped after like the monster might have been what might have happened, and it might have been that monster that might have especially affected Will. It's like the other possibilities that I'm waiting for. Or like the other possibility that I'm considering is basically that monster that showed up from like the huge portal. So then, the laboratory might have straight away taken the life of like that scientist in like the beginning, and like after taking the life of like scientist, like it might have totally escaped through like that fight to like the force of not which might have been what might have happened. It's like the other possibility that I'm considering. And 11 might have totally hidden herself and seen this all this happening, like the monster taking the life of scientist, and maybe this possibility in like the reason for like that strange fear. Not just like the maybe it might not just have to do with like the monster being like the monster, but like 11 certainly having even witnessed possibly like the monster taking the life of like that scientist might also be like the possibility for like 11 being so extremely afraid of like the monster even more than Brenner. This definitely might have been real. So after like the monster might have left to like the throw the pipe out of like Renner's laboratory to like the Northwood Forest. Like at that point, like 11 as well might have only escaped through like that pipe, and like that might have been when like 11 might have seen like the monster chasing after like being chased after by this amount. It's definitely my favorite impression. So like I'm wondering, so like my favorite impression so that like this monster might have been so extremely quick and fast, and so like not much time might have passed after like the monster showed up exactly like during 8 o'clock with like 11 self like the science opening up like the huge portal and like the monster coming out of like the portal, the monster taking the life of like the scientist and monster like straight away escaping from the laboratory through like the pipe and ending up in like the forest, and like the monster seeing Will, and basically the monster chasing after Will, and basically what might have happened would be like precisely through that like outdoor shed, like basically the monster capturing and abducting Will, and heading back into like the parallel world through like a portal the monster might have opened up through like the shed uh, outdoor shed in like Will's home, that the monster abducting Will and leaving just like that might have been what might have happened. And so like I'm looking for like it seems like not much time might have passed throughout all through as all these incidents things might have happened. Like not much time might have passed after like 8 o'clock. So like maybe solely due to that reason, like it's impossible for like the monster to be able to like upset Will and then escape into like the battle world. Even at that point, it's like what might have happened is one possibility that I'm looking for again. Definitely like when the Miriam pressure said like when pop-up had basically showed up to basically inspect like the shed outdoor shed of like Link's home. Like at that point like the Rustling town might have been that exact precise monster trying to get back into like the real world, but it's not being possible for the monster solely due to like it's not being 8 o'clock. Definitely one of the brain pressure. So like, and I was trying this very same monster might have tried multiple times to like basically get back into like the real world, which might have been precisely like the monster like trying to like basically come out through like the walls of like Will's home multiple times and failing. Like this might all be like since like all these things are precisely I think like have happened precisely during daytime, like it was precisely due to like the time not being 8 o'clock being the certain sole reason for like the monster not being able to like integrate into like the railroad. And when like the monster had eventually managed to like chase like Will's mother like to through the walls to the railroad and chase after like Will's mother, like that incident might have happened precisely during 8 o'clock, and 8 o'clock might have been like the precise reason like the energy spike would be definitely happening during 8 o'clock and in that run of energy lab, and that would be the sole reason for like the monster being able to like moving from like has like a free from like the real world to like the parallel world, and like from like the parallel world to like the real world precisely during 8 o'clock might have been what might have happened. It's definitely never been able to. So like I'm looking as for like in that Brenner energy lab alone, like the portal basically staying and remaining open and not automatically go closing, like it might totally have to do with like the whole like folder space of like example the front piece of cat told like Mike and his friend, like basically like currently right now my memory that especially with like the composite being affected by due to like texting energy producing like energy lab like I'm also doing like from Brenner and Abdul Lab, like the range in which like composite would be getting affected would be like the boundaries of like that range will be perfectly almost like the entire of the town, exactly almost like the entire temperature down of open. Definitely my good neighbor. So like so like my personal impression that like the current situation would be like almost like the entirety of like the town Hawkins would be currently in like that folded like kind of state where like I'm saying the fold would be like its maximum like the center point like it won't be like a fully folded paper but like the fold would be in such a manner that the fold would be its maximum precisely at like the location of like the buffer in like for enough laboratory while like the fold would be like basically not perfect at all and basically falling backwards uh, from as like the area as like the more distance from like the popel in like brightness energy laboratory, like the more the distance happens, like the more like the fold will be like backward if the PMI will be able. So like this will be the precise reason for like the monsters like most likely having to depend on like the energy spike for like the monsters to be able to travel from like the real world and like the parallel world. So especially because like it will be especially during 8 o'clock, like when like possibly like another spike will be happening, like the folds that are like folds in like the areas that are outside of like the like energy level, so it would be like coming closer and more perfect precisely due to like the energy spike during 8 o'clock. And this is the place of reason for like my reason that like the monster being able to like possibly would only be able to like certainly travel between like the real world and parallel world, especially during 8 o'clock. And my question is just for like how exactly the portal is like remaining open only in like runners laboratory. And during the sort reason would be like even though the science phase up has said that basically opening up of like the portal would require more energy than humanly possible. Like that might have been totally achieved through like 11 like expression superpower amplifying like the already existing energy in like runners laboratory, and that way like the powerful in runners energy laboratory being opened, and that might have definitely specifically my frame that like that might have been an extremely huge powerful. So like I'm looking after like the step or like abduction of like the scientist in like the very beginning. I'm also going like by the time like a runner might have and his team might have heard of this like cancer reporter Brenner, and by the time like Brenner might have showed up like and the situation might have been like the monster of escaping through like the pipe, and basically Brenner might have pushed quickly, and definitely that scientist in like the beginning might have totally cheated Brenner, and without Brenner of like any like other kind knowledge like he might have secretly wanted to like experience like the open he might have wanted to like open like the portal and experience like that such an achievement for himself in a selfish manner. Like that might have been what might have happened if the cinema was brainwashed. So that way, by the time Brenner found out, might have found out about this and brought on that very night itself, by the time Brenner might have brought back to the Black Energy Laboratory and the ring, the fuse portal uh, might have started to already close and might have reached like such like the fuse portal might have been reduced to like the size that it that is like the current size of like the portal in like energy lab. So like at that point, like the portal might have been about to like fully close, but like might have been through like the process of fully closing. But like what Brenner might have done would be that Brenner might have at that point self acted, and basically what he might have done might have been like he might have used up all of, like the available energy in like Brenner's energy laboratory to like maintain that portal in that current uh, opened up space like the size in which like the portal was like the small size in which like the portal was precisely when Marana might have showed up to his lab that night, like he might have probably given the order to like use all the energy to keep that portal opened in that to maintain that portal in that open state in which it was at that current moment. Definitely my brother. So like even without so that would be like maintaining of like the portal in its like opened up state would be like what's only possible through like all the energy currently present in like Brunner's energy laboratory while like opening up portal from scratch would require would be like the thing that requires like way more energy than humanly possible. Definitely possible temperature. So like I'm possible to even to like maintain like the possibility to like open up state like I'm bring like a whole lot of energy would be like still required. So like I'm runner would be like right now losing a lot of money just to like keep the portal opened up in like just working to like have all that energy to like keep the portal even in like open up state to maintain that process like open up state itself like I'm also bring like a lot of energy being required and that way but I'm not losing a lot of money for that. So like I'm considering this might be the precise possible reasons as well. I'm considering like for like the extreme urgency for runner right now to like catch up 11 so that like if like from runner's point of view, runner will be the only thing that like if he is able to like capture and bring back get 11 then like using 11 superpower like very little quantity of energy would be required within like current laboratory to like which like 11 could amplify and basically keep like the profile in its like opened up to maintain like the profile in its like opened up state. So like this is the precise reason for like the extreme urgency of runner right now to like capture 11 is definitely my perspective for the right now for the time being. So that Brenner will be having like more goals to basically even and on top of that like Brenner would be also having like the intent to like maybe to once he catches 11 for like using 11 to like close since like the friend Teacher has also talked about like possibly existing multiple parallel worlds like Brenner might actually want right now maybe to like close up like that's also like another possibility that I'm using 11 like if Primer gets 11 like basically at that point like Brenner might also have the plan to like basically stop all the energy production and that may have like the portal automatically close so that like using 11 like Brenner could like open another portal to another parallel world which like Brenner would be totally hoping would be like a way better and way better like of a parallel world uh, would be also like maybe like one of the plans also definitely a possibility that I'm also trying another basically depending on the brain versions that like basically like the monster that basically had abducted Barbara like I'm saying that monster might have been like a monster that might have maybe like it might have been like the same monster that might have abducted Bill as well. It's definitely not the same but like so after abducting Bill like the next day while pop-up showed up to like the outdoor shed of like Bill's home like at that point like the monster attempting to like get back into like the real world from like the parallel world and it's failing. So like I'm assuming like it might have succeeded like the next night precisely during 8 o'clock. Like the monster might have been constantly trying on multiple locations. So like I'm assuming it might have succeeded, finally succeeded precisely like the next night precisely during like 8 o'clock. And that at that point it might have once again infiltrated into like the real world. And since then like it might have realized that like maybe like not much time might have passed after like 8 o'clock when like Barbara was like abducted and brought to like the paddle world by like the monsters that they made the rainbow symbol. Like I'm just thinking that very night as well as the monster might have like as usual might have especially around like 8 o'clock like it might have been able to like show up into Northwood Forest and I'm also thinking like there like it might have been present there but like I'm also thinking it might have been definitely only due to like Barbara affecting her finger so that I'm just like the center that might have only drawn it from like Northwood Forest and like that might be how like it might have showed up behind Barbara and might have totally abducted Barbara. Definitely my with them like so this only like the light bulb were beside like the swimming pool like basically flickering. So this only due to like the monster totally affecting the light bulb the most of like it's unique energy and probably affecting light sources whenever it goes it's definitely my understand it might and so like definitely the relations that like the monster won't be able to like travel through light sources of anything it's definitely my it will be like definitely the monster showing up each and every single time it will be like the monster showing up so like these portals this will be creating like around 8 o'clock and basically traveling from like the parallel world to like the real world and abducting and taking things and people like taking animals and people from like the real world, abducting them to from like the real world to like the parallel world will be what will be happening. Just definitely my brain. So definitely my brain direction for like Bill and like Bill's mother like for like the incident where like Bill and Bill's mother had basically communicated and even like in that through like a translucent barrier, proper like barrier, like them being able to like see each other, but like not being able to like pass through for like neither will nor will mother not being able to like pass through from like the real world to like the parallel world, or from like the parallel world to like the real world. This is precisely due to like the according to my theory and example, it would be solely due to like the nature in which like the folding of like between like according to like the science piece of has told Mike and Front, like the nature in which like the current in like the current situation like the folding would be taking place throughout like the that would be like the folding that would be having like the entire range for throughout like possibly through like the area surrounding like the energy level runner like reaching up to like the point where like the composition would be affected, which should be most likely through like the range of like the outer ranges would be covering like almost like the entirety of like the round hopping. So definitely since it's a friendly for to my personal impression like since it wasn't like 8 o'clock, since it was during like daytime that basically uh Will and his like mother have basically seen each other through that translucent kind of wall. Like I'm wondering what might have happened would be like the since like each and every single time like will have managed to like communicate to like with mother, like even if it's through like the phone call, or like even if it's through like like basically whenever Will had communicated with mother and also definitely there might have been like the presence of like the of this exact monster nearby, which would be like the sole factor that might have even made it possible for like Will to even be able to like communicate or even be able to like see his mother through like the translucent wall. Definitely my good thing. Yet like I was like whenever like it would be like the monster being like the flea, not a perfectly well still processing like some of like the powers of the free. It will be the result for like and especially from the like the location as well, being like wins home, which would be like the parts of like the folding of like the paper where like the folding won't be like absolutely like the cloth is not perfect. Like just like according to my impression, like the folding being like almost perfect and close only precisely at like Brenner's at like the bottle in like Brenner's and up in laboratory. So like everywhere else like since like the folding would be like having like the distance between there will be that distance between like the folding and the secondary. The more like the distance away from like the energy level of it. So basically because of this reason, I'm considering like uh, and also this coupled with like the time not being 8 o'clock. These are precise reason for like I'm considering like whenever like the monster is like nearby. Well, I'm considering like at that point, like at that point, I'm considering like the whole like the translucent kind of like a wall. I'm considering would be appearing whenever like the monster would be near to where Will would be, and that way like Will would be at that point would be able to like most likely hear like everything that's like happening in like Will's home at that point. The limit of the encryption, like limit of the encryption is that like due to it will be possibly due to like the nature in which like the folding between like the real world and parallel world might have taken place after like the bottle being opened in like Brennan's laboratory, that and also for like the entirety of like the town of example. So I think that people would be like the nature of like the folding would be in such a manner that basically like the people trapped in like the parallel world, like whether like Will Barber or like right now Nancy, like I'm looking, they would be able to like they would be totally able to like hear what's happening in like the real world on precisely the other side of like where they're standing in like the real world, precisely when there's like the presence of like the monster creature nearby. It's definitely my brain so like this might have been how and due to like the power of the monster and the monster possibly being like a path, not the absolute perfect flea, but like a kind of like a path, partly like kind of like a flea, like I'm thinking that way to be to like coupling with like the nature of like the hoarding, coupling with like the most of like presence nearby would be what allowing like Will to be able to like possibly using his mind for him to be it would be possibly will possibly would be totally it would be using his mind that will would be precisely be able to like give signs and basically tell his mother that basically that he is alive, that basically like when even like communicating through the fairy like to Will's mother, like what that be possible for Will to do with this precisely due to like will possibly from like the battle world alone, like it will be like a one-sided thing that basically from like the battle world like bringing like Will would be able to sense like the things happening in like the real world on the exact other side alone. in the area on like the exact other side precisely while like the monster would be nearby. It's definitely like was very much so like this would be how like they might have sent our nice communicators and like using with mind like we would be able to like do things like to manipulate electric sources and that would be how like from like the while only while in the like the barrel work. It's definitely my favorite shy. And it would just be something that Will alone would be able to do. And was definitely it would be something that only Barbara as well as like Nancy would be able to do. And I was trying to bring them to like eventually actually even do that. Eventually like the future. It's like that's the scenario that I was bring. So to be from like the parent world using their mind that I would be Will might have like even for like called Will's mother. Like even that might have been certainly from like the parent world while like the monster was right nearby. That situation might have been what like allowed and with like the folding like basically this whole collectively might have been like the uh, situation that basically allow that might not only even allow not just for Bill to communicate with like Bill's mother through electric sources such as like not only fairy lights but also through like the phone as well is definitely Michael's rank, and this will be the precise reason for like the reason, like the monster being close and nearby to Will would be that necessary one major necessary condition for them to be able to like communicate with his mother would be one main possible reason for like each and every single time Will have so far communicated with Will's mother like the monster was like totally nearby and had destroyed like the phone and even like the fairy lights and everything. This all happening would be precisely because of like the monster being close would be that possible one absolute necessary condition for like the communication disease software. It's definitely my most remember. So like the name of the reimbursement right now as for like Jonathan right now, Jonathan alone right now not being able to like hear like recording out of Jonathan's name by Nancy while Nancy on the other hand being able to like hear even though it's kind of like not perfectly clear, still like Nancy being able to like recognize and hear like Jonathan's like calling out for Nancy's. But like this would be solely due to like the monster being on like currently being in like the parry word on like the side where like Nancy is trapped in. It's definitely my method. It will be precisely the monster that will be making it right now possible for like Nancy. It will be like the monster presence that will be like right now making it possible for like Nancy to be able to like still even from like the parry world to be able to like hear Jonathan shouting out Nancy's name is definitely my birthday impression. So like I'm definitely my birthday impression that like there will be most likely that's kind of like a short time frame between like possibly I'm considering it to be either from like 8 o'clock to like 8:30. It will be during that time interval of like a half an hour alone that I'm also bring like the monster will be able to like travel from like during which like I'm also bring like the whole kind of the fighting would be like stay in that spiked up state in like Brazil and of the level and it will be precisely that way during that half an hour that I'm referring most likely the monster would be able to like travel from like so the monster would be able to like create like the portal and would be from anywhere in like the town of Hawkins and basically travel from like the parallel world to like the real world and from like the real world to like the parallel world. That's never was the real world. So like I'm also bring right now I'm going to bring like definitely while like the after like the monsters have traveled from like the after like the monster would have created like the portal I'm going to bring like that portal will be slowly reducing in its size but like I'm going to bring like that portal to still remain to still not end up being fully closed until it's like that process half an hour would be over. It's the minimum of the reimbursement. So the reimbursement that like the open portal that's like creatable by like the monsters would be only possible most likely from like the time period of 8 o'clock to like 8:30 and past 8:30 I'm going to the open portal will be straight away will be getting closed off and shut off and I'm going to bring like up from that point on I'm going to bring like it would be like if like the person trapped in like the parallel world is like close, very close to like the monster. Like at that point, I'm also doing like the translucent kind of like a barrier through which like the will and will must have had this each other like kind of faintly like that alone would be possible at that point. And I'm also bring like the more distance if like the time is like past 8:30 and it's like the person trapped in like the parallel world is like the more that person is like from like as like that person distance himself from the same like distance himself from like the distance himself from like the monster like the band. But at that point, like I'm also bring like the like the translucent barrier, like basically changing to like just like that person being able to only hear like the voice of like the person on like the other side in like the real world. I don't. That would be what like Nancy would be right now experiencing, and like the more systems like Nancy would be right now making like the monster in like the parallel world, like the more like Jonathan's voice right now will be getting stranger and stranger. It would be how it would be like things would be working. It's definitely my personal remembrance. What my personal remembrance is that like because of like these monsters being faced with like a possible thing like that they might not have eyes at all. It's definitely my personal remembrance. So like I'm yes, like I'm like then these monsters still having a nose as well as ears as well. Like they'll be able to like smell as well as like hear. It's definitely my preference. And even with that, like I'm considering like them being so extremely strong. It's definitely my preference. And this will be also most likely would be the reason for like someone like will like basically uh, uh, was basically being able to like evade and escape from like these danger like monsters for so long. It's definitely my best impression. Jack would be this would be one main factor of definitely my best impression. And this position like Will has like a high IQ. Like I'm just like Will might have been able to quickly figure this out. And that might have been like a huge factor in like basically Will being able to like survive for so long. It's definitely my best impression. Yes, like I'm just like in that parallel world, like I'm also like these monsters might have still caused like the maybe like caused still the wipe out of like the majority of humans. It's also the same in like the parallel world of the name with the Rainmaker. And I'm also like that a major factor being like basically these monsters like affecting lights and basically like wherever these monsters would be going, like I'm referring like they will be like causing like all of like the light sources to get destroyed. And on top of that, like the parallel version of Runner might have kept this secrets from like it will be only Runner and his team alone that might have knew about like the events that may have been so like the rest of the world might have been like totally unaware of this. So like I was wondering and these monsters might have like the initial monster of the ship might have been like the battle version of 11 that might have turned into like the initial monster and it might have been able to like lay its own zone and I'm also putting like these monsters might have only multiplied and that way like taken over and basically might have wiped out like the majority of like the human existence in like the battle world in such a manner. So also definitely my personal impression. So like my personal ambitions were like in the case of Will, how Will might have only gotten caught and upset by this monster might have been through like sound like like it might have been since like Will was scared and was like only Will might have seen the monster and got scared and might have started running. So like the sound of like the footsteps like the monster might have chased us like sound of footsteps. So like it is might have definitely not been able to like figure out like the monster's weakness. So like it might have been like the sounds that built myself made all the way to like the all the way to like that wooden shed outside the home. Like I never remember like like being so extremely scared. Like I'm remembering like the smell of will sweat as well. Like I was remembering might have been a factor in like the monster of the thing will. But like I'm remembering like in the case of Barbara, definitely I'm remembering like the like with like Barbara hurting something that and like the smell of blood might have totally been like that factor like definitely that might have been like the sole factor in like Barbara getting up captured and abducted by the three monsters especially when the rainbow so like definitely so like the monster and specifically remember the mission that like the faceless monster would definitely be having a nose till that sense of smell still definitely remember the like a myriad versions that like even though I'm preparing these monsters to like these faceless monsters to like not have like eyesight and like them to be only be relying on like the sense of smell as well as like their sense of hearing. Like I'm preparing yes, like I'm preparing these monsters to be having like all sorts of unique powers and basically I'm preparing like these monsters also being like extremely cunning and tricky. Even with such disadvantages and on top of that like I'm preparing these monsters will be having like extremely superior, extremely tough and extreme defensive. Let me remember the reason they would have be having such extreme tough body that I'm preparing would be that like I'm preparing these monsters will be extremely hard to take down as well. Due to that, it's also definitely my personal impression as for like what might have eventually led to like basically like the wipe out of like the majority of like the humans in like the parallel world, and hence would be like the first reason for like the parallel world in that most likely would be like entirely dark and basically with it being like so empty and unclean, and basically all that would be the first episode of the cinema of the realm. So like the cinema of the realm right now, as for like right now Nancy being able to like finally make it back to like the real world from like the parallel world through another free portal, and Nancy getting saved by and rescued by Jonathan. Like this all being possible for Nancy and possibly maybe solely and surely due to like Nancy's luck, which definitely I was in the sense. So that's because like what might have happened would be like I'm saying like the moment Nancy had entered through like the portal into like the parallel world. Like basically at that point when Nancy had seen like the monster, like at that point like Nancy might have ran away, might have totally left out and basically might have totally ran through that forest in like the parallel exactly on the straight direction towards like Brenner's laboratory. Might have been something what like Nancy might have done accidentally without realizing, especially my personal impression. And according to my personal impression, uh, since according to my personal impression, exactly like how like the science paper had showed like my kind of friend about like the folding between like the real world and parallel world. This might have definitely happened once like Brenner had created like once like the energy portal once like the portal was created within like the Brenner's energy lab. At that point, like the folding still to remember the impression that like the folding might have been between like the real world and parallel world might have been created such a way that like the center of like the folding would be like the perfect portal would be like the closest and like the perfect folding, and that would be like the perfect in like Brenner's energy lab, while the two ends of like the paper would be like would be folded not in like the proper manner, the proper or purpose manner, just like there being like huge gaps between like the ends, and basically like from the end to like the center where like the folding is perfect. Like it would be like an inclination kind of like increase in like the folding from in like the perfection of like the folding from like the end to leading to like the center. So like I'm considering like the center being like a energy laboratory. This might have been like reason for like I'm considering like the second tree portal through which like basically Nancy after running far away from like the first portal. After seeing like the monster, like the second free portal through which like Nancy had escaped back to the real world, that portal might have been like that tree might have been like so that portal it was in that tree might have been like at the distance that was like closer to Brenner's energy level. For instance, according to my considering like the energy spike totally happening in like would be totally happening in like Brenner's laboratory, especially from 8 o'clock to like 8:30. And since like these monsters might have by now totally figured out about like this and these monsters might have totally figured out about like the existence of like the real world as well after like through the when the first time like the portal was opened in like Brenner's laboratory by that scientist in like the beginning, and basically when like at that point most likely the monster might have that way entered into like the real world. Like it might be only at that point that like the monster might have even realized like the existence of like the real world. It's definitely not the real world. So like I'm just wondering like at that point like the monster after like escaping through the pipes to like the northwest forest, like I'm just wondering like it might have only after that like I'm just wondering like after like the abduction of Will and everything, like basically it might have been like desperately trying to like basically get back into like the real world from like the parallel world, and basically eventually like it might have consistently tried and failed, and it might have once again been possible for like the monster, especially during like the next night at 8 o'clock might have been what might have happened. So like eventually it might have totally figured out like the time period is like from 8 and 8:30, or it will be able to like move between like the parallel world and the real world. So like I'm just going like on top of that, like it might have only like the one might have only like the Northwood forest because like it might have only wanted to like hunt for like the animals in like the Northwood forest. So like I was like definitely since like according to my personal impression, like I'm just saying like the faceless monster won't be having like eyesight, like they will be only hunting using their using their hearing as well as like smelling senses. Like I'm just saying like they would have like created like multiple portals. They would have created portals in like multiple streets in like multiple from like the parallel world, and that way might have entered into like that way would be how like they would be entering from like the parallel world to like the real world each and every single night during these days, especially during that half an hour time period. These days, it's definitely one of the So there's a reason for like multiple trees having like portals. It's definitely my opinion before. Like I'm looking like with like the folding being more and more perfect as like the distance toward like the energy laboratory would be getting shorter and shorter. So this would be like sort of reason for like my opinion on that like basically Nancy right now was able to like still while like and I was like the initial follow through is like Nancy has entered into like the parallel world might have been totally fully closed by now. Definitely my positive. Yet for like this current free throw which like Nancy had was able to like escape back into like the real world. That for it to still remain open, like the necessary condition might have been like on top of like that most likely being like close up to like Brenner's energy laboratory and like the folding effect and everything. Like even on top of that, like I'm also thinking at that point like even like the monster as well was like so close to Nancy. Like I'm just like the monster presence as well might have since like the monster will actually be like kind of even if not a perfect play, still it would be have like certain powers of like that it would be like kind of like imperfect yet like would be like kind of like a play that's like not perfect in like the perfect sense. So since even because of like the monster powers as well might have played a role in the, basically that portal in like step three right now that basically coupled with like energy laboratory being even closer to that trajectory would be like what might have especially right now luckily allowed like Nancy to be able to like escape from like the battle world to like the real world right now. It's definitely members of the name of the story approaching right now with like Nancy right now having experienced like the parallel world and entered like the parallel world and having made it back to like the real world. And Jonathan right now having seen like the portal in like the trees like slowly closing like that process has been since like Jonathan has seen like basically like Nancy and Jonathan right now like ambassador like them after like escaping ambassador like them don't wouldn't be able to like keep that such extremely crucial information to themselves that I'm also bringing like definitely Nancy and Jonathan in like the middle of the night I'm also doing like them straight away going straight up to like Hopper home. This is like the scenario that I'm bringing and some of them like frantically saying all the things they have experienced right now. And I'm also like Hopper genuinely totally believing it, especially after like Hopper finding out like all the suspicious things and like the fake body of like Will as well as like the dummy body of Will as well as like with like all the knowledge that Hopper has already gained concerning like Brenner and basically with like Hopper right now already like dealing everything Will's mother has said like basically by now like I'm like without much delay I'm like uh, not without much great delay. I'm considering right now with Nancy as well as like uh, Jonathan will be straight away trying to like find Hopper and I'm considering them totally not only finding Hopper in like the middle of the night, like whether to like either in Hopper's home or like this. Right now, Hopper is in like even like the middle of the night, if like Hopper is in like the home of like his mother, then I'm considering like eventually like them heading there to see if like Hopper is there and like them eventually finding that Hopper and basically considering that them totally revealing everything that all the knowledge and their experience and considering like at that point considering like Hopper like and I'm definitely pretty Hopper to like not tell them not to tell about this to anyone and Hopper himself I'm considering like even while he's currently still is like the teacher remember this like Hopper still keeping this information to himself and not telling his like subordinates precisely because of like Hopper probably thinking along the lines of like if he even tells his subordinates already like Hopper will totally having would be feeling that having that feeling that really definitely the subordinates are going to totally think that he's crazy and that way possibly Hopper even losing his job like maybe along the lines Hopper would be also thinking so like I'm also saying Hopper deciding to like go up to those precise streets with like Jonathan and Nancy in the middle of the night in the middle of that very exact night is like the scenario that I'm remembering. So and I'm going to find like it's like Jonathan and Nancy find Hopper at like Will home. Then I'm going to find like Will's mother as well being along with them or like if but Nancy as well as like Jonathan finds Hopper in like Hopper's home. Then I'm going to be just Hopper and Nancy and Jonathan that would be like once again heading back to like support. And I'm wondering they are like I'm wondering like them finding that safe location where like they have basically uh, like where the whole incident has happened with like Nancy had entered into like the portal and everything. Basically, they are like on the spring by the time like they would be bringing Hopper like on the spring like them not being able to like see any portal or anything like. Jonathan would be telling Hopper about like the portal opening and closing, but like on the spring still them searching around like the street, like checking like all sorts of streets in that area and like looking for, but like them not being able to like pick the spot. No, by then they won't be able to like spot not even a single tree with like any sort of like portal or anything. Nor would they be running into like the monster at all at like Murphy Falls. Precisely because of like that time gap between like 8 and 8 to 8:30 and September thing. That time gap where like alone like the monster would be like able to like travel between like the real and parallel was that time period will be over. So like I'm considering like Hopper like basically all of them being disappointed, but like I'm considering like them eventually deciding to like basically show up to this very exact Merkur for like the next night at the very exact time period. Like basically, I'm assuming it would be most likely Hopper that might, or like Johnson that might come to such a conclusion that maybe it's time to important. Like maybe like not to like basically for once for them to like once again find like the bottle in the fridge like time would be absolutely necessary. I'm considering maybe along this line, like either Jonathan or Hopper figuring out and basically the next night while they will be showing up to this like place for film or like I'm considering like at that point I'm considering the refreshers at that point like the next night like especially during like 8 and 8:30 like around that time then like searching the trees and them finding like the fossil but like I'm considering them also finding like the monster in like the real world as well. The monster totally running into like the monster as well in like the real world like the scenario that I'm considering for to happen like the very next night. That's definitely one of the reasons. At that point, I'm positive I think it will be Nancy Johnson as well as Popper, I believe, at that point. So like at that point, I'm going to definitely or like I'm considering Nancy won't be present because like I'm considering like Nancy's mother like expectations like it's already nice like and with like all these with the parents like I'm considering like Nancy's mother totally surrounding Nancy and I'm considering like Nancy solely possibly maybe being unable to like leave the next night is also like a possibility that I'm considering. So maybe either it will be like the next night it will be like Nancy, Jonathan, and Papa that will be something the plot. Or like its mother as well will be there. Or like I'm considering like it will be just like Jonathan and Papa that will be something the plot. Yeah, the next night for like the portal in the tree. And like I'm considering like themselves will totally run into like the monster in like the real world. And at that point I'm considering the monster totally straight away. It will be like Jonathan that will be first running into like the monster and like the monster attacking Jonathan. At that point, Hopper like attacking like the monster and like Hopper using his weapon and basically attack the monster. Yet like I was revealing that weapon to not even face the monster without. It will be like having extremely tough defenses and everything. And I was doing like even Hopper's weapon not being able to like the monster at all, like the scenario that I was doing. And then I was bringing like, the monster most likely capturing Jonathan actually witnessing like for the first time like it will be at that point that for like the first time like that Jonathan would be actually witnessing what might have exactly happened to Will. So basically Jonathan would be like getting sidelined and would be totally scared by like the monster at that point and it would be like Hopper by himself like most likely fighting like the monster with his weapon on like the monster and that right then like the monster capturing Hopper and basically abducting and taking monster through like a portal, like the monster creating like the portal, quickly capturing Hopper and Hopper won't be able to like free himself and like the monster quickly creating like the portal and leading through the tree like and something like Jonathan and extremely scared Jonathan like like from like the sidelines, like basically watching this happen, and basically Jonathan at that point shockingly realizing what exactly happened to Will. It's like down to like the very fine detail here. Would be along the line to happen, the scenario to happen that I'm supposed to show it. Okay. So Hopper being taken into like the battle world at that point. And considering at that point itself, like I'm considering like the half an hour time period would be like over. So that at that point, and I'm considering like Jonathan for a moment being like frozen with fear, and at that point felt like the tree would be like quickly, like the portal would be like quickly getting shut down, slowly getting not so extremely slowly, but like the portal getting shut down. So like at that point, maybe I'm considering Jonathan trying to like get back into that portal to like at that point like Jonathan would be like quickly waking up and realizing that he needs to like save Hopper. So maybe trying to like get through that portal, but like I'm also feeling like that portal by then like would have closed enough for like Jonathan to not be able to like enter. So like that's happening, and basically Johnson at that point is like frantically searching around for like to see if like other bottles are present, but like I'm assuming there won't be any other bottles. That's nice. That's like the scenario that I'm assuming. So like with that, like Johnson returning back and telling what exactly happened to like his mother, like I'm assuming that his mother as well would have witnessed is like the scenario that I'm assuming. That way, like pop up like the very next night, I'm considering like Hopper most likely getting captured and affected by like the monster and being taken into like the parallel world. And there I'm considering like the Hopper will be like after like being taken into like the parallel world as like the monster will be after that would be about to take the life of like Hopper. Like I'm considering like exactly like in Barbara's case, like I'm considering like Hopper in Hopper's as well case, like I'm considering like the monster taking abducting Hopper into like the battle world. But like I was saying, like then Hopper being able to like succeeding like free himself from like the monster and like Hopper like at that point like basically would be by then with like by everything like Nancy would have told Hopper like by then like Hopper would be well fully aware that she's like the parallel world, so she's not the real world and this is like the parallel world. So like they are like Hopper deciding to definitely Hopper not even bothering to like trying to like return back into the real world. Instead like Hopper on realizing that this is like the parallel world, this is where like Will and like Barbara has gone missing to like like Hopper like absolutely feeling duty bound and basically straight away deciding to like stealthily explore like the parallel world, and straight away like Hopper would be like the one thing in Hopper's mind at that point itself would be like to straight away go up to like Will's home to see in like the parallel world to see if like he can find like Will. So like I'm also bringing but like I'm also bringing precisely just by the time like Hopper would be making it to like the Will's home in like the parallel world. I'm also bringing right just before like Hopper would be making it there, like I'm also bringing like the Will being once again being chased by like the monster to the point that Will won't be able to like hide anywhere near Will's home. That Ambassador Will at that point coincidentally right before Hopper will be making it to like Will's home, like Ambassador Will totally running away from Will's home, and like that would be like Ambassador like for a long time Ambassador like after running away like Will's and Ambassador like after Will running away from Will's home, like Ambassador Will not running back to like Will's home anytime soon at all, like the scenario that I was going. So Hopper showing at that point, like eventually Hopper showing up to like Will's home and Hopper being extremely disappointed at not seeing Will in the Will's home in like the parallel world, like the scenarios that I'm referring and I'm saying. And then like, eventually Hopper possibly communicating with like Will's mother and Jonathan from like the parallel world in like Will's home to like the real world Will's home. So also like an even possible scenario that I'm referring and so like the dilemma that I'm wrestling right now is for like Steve right now seeing like Jonathan comforting Nancy in like Nancy's home, in like Nancy's home, like especially with like Nancy's mother totally not having been okay at all, but like Nancy's spending like the night with Steve. Definitely my primary impression is for like Jonathan even being present in Nancy's home right now. I'm looking like what might the precise reason would be precisely I'm looking like Nancy's parents might not be home at all. Like they would be like working, and basically they might have been late that night. It's certainly not the primary. So like they might have not made it back home. It's definitely one of the and that's for Mike. Definitely I'm looking like Mike would be totally out there. Like basically, poor Mike would be out there along with like Dustin frantically, even like the middle of the night, like frantically searching everywhere for like 11. So like I'm looking Mike as well would have not returned back home. So definitely my personal emergency, and I'm was not interpreting like the scenario to be like definitely with like you right now seeing like Jonathan along with like Nancy in Nancy's room, definitely the extreme bully in Steve would be right now getting awakened. It's definitely my personal impression, and I'm totally from like the very next day on like I'm considering like Steve to precisely check on like the very next day in school itself, like I'm considering like Steve to like precisely target for Jonathan. It's like the scenario that I'm considering like Steve totally like my first impression is definitely for like the scenario to be like Steve, like the next day I'm going to bring things told like Steve definitely won't be even bothering to like miss Nancy, but even before that, like I'm going to think like Steve would be precisely would be fixed in his and would have fixed in his mind to like precisely to fully for Johnson, just like the scenario that I'm going to bring and Steve doing that, and while Steve would be doing that, I'm going to bring like Nancy would be like totally would be like showing up exactly at that kind of seeing like Steve uh, like pulling like for Jonathan and I'm also bringing Nancy totally depending Jonathan and Nancy coming to like depend on Jonathan definitely especially after like Jonathan like saving Nancy from like the battle would definitely like that absolute strong bond between like Nancy and Jonathan definitely would have been formed. Yet like I'm also bringing like even still I'm also bringing Nancy even until that point would be still would be like would be still having her would be still with the of the mindset that like she would be still only seeing like Jonathan even at that point as like a good friend with like it was the only like the bond of friendship between like Nancy and Jonathan even at that point would have grown stronger definitely my friendship but like I was going it would be that incident which I'm supposed to think to happen like the very next day at school but like I'm considering like Steve would be like totally bullying for Jonathan because at that point that I'm considering like that love that she might have only Nancy might have Nancy lacked the love or like the feeling of affection that Nancy has towards Steve would be solely due to that Nancy most likely feeling that Steve like totally out of her league. So like I'm considering like it would be totally like a feeling of like as if like Nancy's like totally achieving something by like totally having Steve as a boyfriend would be along the lines of like a feeling that I'm considering like Nancy will be having like certainly my brother impression towards like Steve, but like I'm considering that whole feeling like towards like Steve that Nancy will be having totally instantly being gone straight away as like Nancy like the very next day would be definitely seeing like the scenario that I'm considering seeing like Steve bullying Jonathan and at that point I'm considering like from that point like Nancy would be like totally not only defending straight away defending Jonathan but like that approach is like towards like strongly being formed within Nancy's like the scenario that I'm looking and definitely that is jealousy had like Nancy defending Jonathan would only be sharply increasing that absolute jealousy towards like Jonathan within like the scenario that I'm looking for. So my particular impression is for like a scenario to be like while Nancy would be defending Jonathan and protecting Jonathan from Steve, like I'm particular like Steve at that point like totally making it I'm particular that to be like a huge crowd of like the others like basically a huge crowd will be formed around like Nancy, Steve and Jonathan at that point. So like I'm particular at that point like Steve trying to like make fun of like Steve mocking Nancy and like probably making fun of like Nancy and like kind of like talking in an insulting manner about Nancy, like just like the scenario that I'm about to bring, and like that would be totally pushing Nancy, and like I'm about to bring at that point, like Nancy totally telling, looking Steve in her face and telling Steve that baby she loves Jonathan. It's like scenarios that I'm about to bring. So that would be like such a huge blow to like his ego at that point. On top of already having seen like Nancy with like Jonathan in like Nancy for it's definitely my luxury impression. Luxury impressions definitely for like Nancy telling Steve and in front of like the entire crowd like that basically she loves Jonathan and like Nancy like pulling Jonathan away from there and basically like, and that would be like at that point, like Nancy would have totally just said that only to like toss back to like Steve at that point because like Nancy would have been so extremely enraged with like Steve totally and shocked as well with like the extreme bully side of like Steve being revealed at that point. It's like the scenario that I was in that like Nancy wanted might have only wanted to like say something back to like Steve at that point is like the scenario that I'm delivering. So like Steve at that point being kind of shocked and basically Nancy pulling Jonathan away, like the scenario that I'm delivering. And then I'm delivering like Nancy and Jonathan having like Jonathan asking Nancy about like what she said to like what she said in front of Steve that basically she loves Jonathan. So like I'm delivering that to be an interaction between like Jonathan and Nancy where like Jonathan would be asking Nancy as to like why she said that basically like basically we both know that like you don't love me. Like basically along such lines, Jonathan telling Nancy and like I'm about to like during that interaction would be when I'm about to bring Nancy actually realizing that like that like Jonathan that what not only that like Nancy actually during that interaction realizing that basically everything Jonathan had said during while they were searching for like the monster in like Mirkwood was like all that thing, entire thing that Jonathan said was like exactly right, and just Nancy, due to her insecurity, was totally trying to desperately lie to herself and was lying to herself all these past years. Like Nancy, like basically thinking along such lines, and basically Nancy is genuinely at that point feeling that basically Jonathan was right the entire time about Steve, and at that point I was wondering Nancy also realizing that like Nancy has developed love and affectionate feelings towards like Jonathan, just like the scenario that I'm going. And at that point, like I was wondering that at that point during that exact interaction when I was with Nancy even telling Jonathan that like you are right all along, and something along such lines, and basically that like Nancy genuinely likes Jonathan now. Like basically Nancy expressing her feelings of affection towards like Jonathan, saying that to Jonathan is like at that point is like the scenario that I'm remembering and my positive impression. And my positive impression that is fitting on to especially for like Steve to like act in such an extremely immature manner that basically even after like Nancy would be that even after like it will be far too eventually it will be far too obvious for like Steve that basically Nancy doesn't love Steve anymore and that like Nancy now totally loves is in love with like Jonathan. Even at that point I was like Steve acting in an extremely mature manner and basically talking Nancy and Jonathan with and Steve like desperately trying to cause trouble for like Jonathan, specifically Jonathan, like even more than Nancy likes the extreme anger of Steve and jealousy of Steve would be especially towards like Jonathan. So like Steve is totally doing a lot of things to like probably for Jonathan eventually is like until Jonathan finally until it finally goes off like the limit and the tipping point and until finally Jonathan finally reacts back and basically puts Steve into place with like the scenario within piece of kind of like a scenario. Not distant future, but like an eventual scenario that I'm about to bring. And like Nancy would be right there beside Jonathan when that happened. It's also like the eventual scenario that I'm about to bring. I'm about to remember. So like the name of the reimbursement right now was like Jonathan right now comforting Nancy in Nancy's room, in Nancy's home. Like basically, I'm going to bring like luckily for Jonathan, like potentially right before Jonathan would be leaving and like saying good night to like Nancy. Like I'm going to bring like Mike most likely showing up. That's like the scenario that I'm going to bring. So like I'm going to bring like Mike on the other hand, like I'm going to bring still thinking about the reimbursement that like Mike won't be no matter how frantically and Australia might can doesn't do something for 11 like them not finding 11 that way is like the scenario that I'm about to bring. So like I'm just and like Mike would be totally sad and disappointed with like even Lucas as well like Mike having spikes like Lucas and everything like basically Mike would be like showing up to his home extremely sad and disappointed. But then like I'm about to bring when Mike would be seeing Jonathan, I'm about to bring like Jonathan having like an awkward moment at that point. Mike and Jonathan having kind of like an awkward moment at that point. But like I'm also from still like Mike would be like at least feeling a bit of comfort and happy at that point. That basically because like Mike was very impressive that like the person that like Nancy was taping to send that time like she like basically Mike might have definitely not thought like Steve at all. Definitely my brother Emerson. So like right now, like basically I'm also bringing maybe for Mike at that point to like feel a bit of like comfort and Mike would be totally happy for his sister Nancy at that point that basically Mike I'm also bringing at that point feeling as if like his sister has totally found like the right person at least that it's like Bill's brother Jonathan that basically Mike would totally not only love Bill alone but like I'm also bringing Mike would be totally also like since like Bill was like is like my great friend. Like I'm also pretty, like might have in like the past might have along with like Sapna and others might have gone to like Bill's home in like the past multiple times in like the past and like Mike would be totally in like having that kind of like a good bond of friendship with like Bill's brother Jonathan as well. Definitely a good friend. So like I'm also pretty, like Mike totally feeling at least a little bit of comfort and a bit of happiness and like feeling that like at least the sister Nancy has found at least now has found like the right person would be along the lines like was going maybe like Mike should be. at that point. It's like a possible scenario that I'm considering, and I'm considering it's like the Indian I'm right now with like Hopper right now telling that will mother about like career within daughter, and soon after like the dialogue that Hopper says that basically what of the entire time that he was looking for Will, that he was looking for some other kid, like basically that dialogue of like Hopper with like the room space, like ambassador, like that would totally have like multiple layers of meanings. Remember very much like the my very much like on surface level, but like what Hopper might have been telling Will's mother would be like about like basically about 11, like basically like so then that time he was not the person he thought he was looking for was like not villain it being 11. That was that was the only like the surface level of like the meaning, but like then more than that, like I'm listening while Hopper was saying that dialogue, like Hopper was like kind of like having like a confused face, like specifically when I was drinking. The confused face would be like precisely because of like Hopper even saying that dialogue as soon as talking about like Syria missing daughter Jane, like considering definitely Hopper might have remembered about like his own daughter Sarah. Like basically that Hopper I'm considering like that confused thing might be due to like the Hopper's possible realization that like him being so extremely desperate to like find Bills more than anything else in his life, like would be possibly due to that him trying to like that way trying to compose himself for his loss of like his daughter Sarah. Like basically that by finding Bill like he might like that Hopper might get that feeling as if like he was able to like uh save Sarah. Like he has lived like the reality, even while the reality is would definitely be that he wasn't able to like save Sarah. Definitely I was saying like Sarah would definitely be might have definitely died. It's definitely maybe correct. And even like the body of Sarah might have definitely not at all been a dummy body. It's also definitely member of the rain. So definitely Hopper right now through that dialogue would be like a realization that like he's trying to like get that feeling as if like he's like actually saving Sarah by him if he's able to like save Will would be like that realization would be like the reason for like the confused face of Hopper right now. It's definitely one of the reasons. And maybe like Hopper might even be right now desperately trying to make himself believe that maybe like Hopper might be slowly maybe even going into like delusional kind of the face is also like a possibility that I'm looking because like even though Hopper might have actually seen like Sarah's like his daughter Sarah's dead body and everything. Like even after that, like Hopper right now, especially with like him recently seeing like Vince's body being like a dummy body, like even though definitely Sarah's body might have definitely not have been a dummy body, like but right now Hopper would be also possibly trying to like desperately trying to make himself believe in like maybe along reaching is maybe it's even reaching like the point of him going into like a delusional kind of state as it to like the possibility of like Sarah still being alive. That would be what like Hopper would be desperately wanting to believe. To believe as the ambition. So like so certainly because of this reason I'm going to bring Hopper right now behind like the confused Facebook also be having like another layer of meaning where like Hopper would be like actually the confused manner would be also coming to like a say of like a thinking of like a possibility of like Sarah actually possibly being alive. Like so also definitely might would be along that lines of like same kind of way example something like Copper would be also in a conscious manner would be singing right now of such a possibility of this thought of thing being alive. So also certainly would be what Copper right now would be singing right now. It's definitely my very embarrassing, but still my very embarrassing is definitely that like Sarah has definitely died and I'm also feeling like Hopper only being able to like find that out only towards the very end of the show is like the scenario that Amber finally by the time Hopper Amber because even after Hopper would be finally succeeding in like saving Will and Amber like through his like to like save Will like Hopper would be like we through each and every single moment of like his search for Will like through each of those moments of his search like Amber from this point on like Hopper would be deep down would be like desperately hoping that like Sarah as well would be like alive for like the possibility of like Sarah as well being alive. But like I'm going to be towards like I'm considering it to be only towards the very end while Hopper would be finally saving will successfully saving Will and capture it front up like and at that point would be when like I'm suffering like it will be through Brenner like that I'm suffering like it will be Brenner that will be most likely revealing that basically uh Sarah like 11 was like the 11th experiment and like the from like the 1 to 10 experiment subject the subject like I'm suffering like in between them was like the real daughter Jane as well as like Terrier's daughter Jane as well as like Sarah were like numbers like between like 1 to 10. It's definitely my brain. In that way, like Hopper like shockingly realizing the truth that basically like that he can't bring back his daughter. That is not Sarah's like no more. Like and then also bring like Hopper totally being extremely disturbed and disappointed. And then was like Terrier's daughter Jane, like as for the missing daughter of Terrier's Jane that definitely won't be 11. But definitely my personal impressions. Like definitely my personal impressions that like even 11 like I'm personal like 11 verse like they I'm personal that it will be solely based on like the villain runner like basically deciding to like I'm personal like all the 10 experiments being a failure like what might have been what might have happened. So like I'm personal Jane as well as Sarah might have been like among like the experiments that had failed and by failure like it would by failure like they might have only like is like the scenario that I'm of like about to do that I'm going to doing. So Sarah as well as the real missing daughter Jane might have died. It definitely might have been impression. But like uh and maybe I'm going to bring Sarah might have been like the 10th failure of like an experiment. It's definitely my impression. And maybe it might have been at that point that like I'm going to bring like Brenner might have decided that basically to have Tom's daughter as like the 11th. It's definitely my book payment. So like what Brenner might have done, I'm still thinking my book mentioned that like Brenner might have had a child with like the most brilliant woman, like with like the woman in this like science team with like the highest IQ. Like I'm looking like he might have had a child with her, and basically that child might be most likely 11. It's definitely my secondary impression. My secondary impression is that like the villainous runner might have even taken the decision to like have a child, might and God is like at that point itself like when he then took the decision to like he might have decided to like call it 11. And basically that even taking the runner even taking that decision to like have a child might have been solely due to like him wanting like the 11th experiment to be a success. It's definitely my secondary impression. Definitely my secondary impressions were like definitely towards like the very end. It's when I'm going to think my secondary impression that would be even after saving Copper would have finally succeeded like saving Will that I was listening to be even after that like through Brenner that Copper would be like maybe during like the interrogation of Brenner that I was listening like Copper like finding out that basically Sarah had died like basically and at that point, I'm also bring like Copper being like totally traumatized, and I'm also bring like still I'm also bring like Copper at that point would be feeling absolutely and extremely lonely with like Copper having that experience feeling as if like he has absolutely no one in his life. And maybe that would be when like I'm also bring like without much delay at all like Will along with like Jonathan as well as like Will's mother like showing up to like Hopper's home while they would be like showing up to Hopper's home and like I'm considering like Hopper being like most likely being in like such an extreme Hopper's home itself being like totally messy and like Hopper being like totally in like an extremely like them totally seeing like an extremely disturbed Hopper there and I'm considering it right then like most likely it would be like seeing Will like I'm considering at that point like Will I'm considering totally running towards like Hopper and like seeing Will I'm considering like Hopper totally being happy at that point. And I'm considering like that whole interaction during that point is when I'm considering them resulting in like Hopper having a new family. And that would be like Will's family like along with like Will's mother as well as Jonathan and Will like basically Hopper moving into like Will's home and basically like Hopper that way having a new family is like the eventual scenario that I'm still thinking about to remember the end of. So like the main agenda question right now with like Nancy has been so extremely scared and traumatized by seeing like the monster that basically Nancy right now like being too extremely afraid of like sleeping alone that is the with like right now Jonathan as well sleeping in the same room like I'm like definitely as to like what might have happened would be like obviously while Nancy and Jonathan return back definitely might have been reference to that like and his parents might have been late and basically they might have not returned afterwards. So like Nancy might have had the keys. So like they might have entered and I'm also thinking like Nancy might have been like so extremely scared that and traumatized that basically Nancy might have totally forgotten about closing the door and like Jonathan as well. Like my very impression were like Jonathan as well seeing like the portal and it opening and closing and everything was like the Nancy's situation with like Nancy being so extremely scared. Like Jonathan as well at that point might have totally forgotten to like close the door, especially when there's a emergency. So like I'm was like from that point on, like Nancy and Jonathan might have been in like Nancy's role, and I'm also thinking, like what might have happened would be like Mike might have been the person who might have next showed up to like his home after like frantically having searched for 11 and like just sat yielding now for the because that's what might have happened. So remember so, like the next person to arrive at like Mike's home might have been Mike, and I'm also thinking like Mike might have found it like because Mike was so extremely disturbed like I was like even though like might have only seen like skirt or like off the front door like being in like an open state like still I'm also like might have uh not not seen it like some move to like totally investigate into that like so like I'm also like might have only closed the door and might have been in his like basement where like always element was so like might have been saying that. So like I was thinking, uh, that might have been when like my parents might have showed up and like Mike might have opened the door and like my parents might have entered. So like this entire time like I was thinking like Nancy and Jonathan might have or even before all this happening like I was thinking like Nancy and Jonathan might have fallen asleep, might have been woken up like them like already in like bed like I was looking like even though Nancy was like so extremely scared like she might have been totally been also extremely exhausted like mentally and physically might have been so extremely exhausted from like the whole stress and everything. So definitely also like a possibility that I'm considering maybe that like Nancy might have totally fallen asleep when the same with like Jonathan as well might have totally fallen asleep. Like the scenario that I'm considering to happen. And I was considering like the next morning, like I was considering like Nancy's mother, like as usual, like heading over to like Nancy's home to like wake up Nancy, and like I was thinking the scenario to be like the next morning, like Nancy's mother, totally being extremely enraged and being shocked at seeing like Jonathan in Nancy's room. So like I was thinking not only in Nancy's room but in Nancy's bed, sleeping beside Nancy. So like that number seven to not only talk but like mainly enrage Nancy's mother and I'm also like Nancy's mother totally losing it and I'm also like her totally shouting at like Nancy and Jonathan and mainly Nancy like the scenario that I'm also bring so like I'm looking like giving that whole stare to like Jonathan as well. It's like the scenario that I'm looking and I'm also at that point Jonathan not leaving Nancy's home through like the window but like I'm also like Jonathan would be most likely going through like the stairs and basically at that point, like while Jonathan would be like walking downstairs and considering like Mike and his like father would be and his sister would be in like most likely in like the dining table. It's like the possible scenario that I'm considering. So like I'm considering like Mike's father being totally shocked as well and him as well staring at Jonathan while Mike on the other hand would be like happy for like happy as Mike would be like at that point only thinking that like so like it's good stuff like Nancy might be having like a relationship with like his brother Jonathan. So like Mike I'm considering like totally being happy about it. Just like the scenario that I'm considering. But like I'm considering then for Nancy, like I'm considering like totally not getting that peace at all. But like I'm considering like both like Nancy's mother, I'm considering like more than Nancy's father, like it would be Nancy's mother that I'm considering it will be like deeply uh, like scolding Nancy and like I'm considering like Nancy shouting back like because like Nancy would have at that point had it with like the extreme trauma of like the previous day and like seeing like the monster and everything. Like, on top of that, like with like the very next morning, where like I'm also like Nancy's mother is definitely shouting at Nancy. Though that at that point, like now Nancy and also maybe shouting back, not only shouting back at like Nancy's mother, but also screaming as well. It's also like a scenario that I'm remembering. So like at that point, Nancy's mother leaving Nancy's room, and basically Nancy's mother and deliberately straight away taking the car and basically heading over to Jonathan's home. It's like the scenario that I'm bring. And there, like I was bringing Nancy's mother, like totally, Jonathan will be right there at that point. And at that point, I'm considering Nancy's mother, like in an insulting manner to to like Jonathan's mother, like I'm telling her to not ever that she doesn't want to see Jonathan ever shows to her home will be along the lines about the thing have to say. And I'm considering like at that point, like I'm considering Jonathan's mother like not saying anything at all, and I'm considering say most likely maybe the same story to Nancy's mother. And I'm also bring that, and Nancy's mother like angrily looking at Jonathan and leaving. It's like the scenario that I'm also bringing. At that point, I'm also bring like Jonathan's mother like totally scolding Jonathan is like the scenario that I'm also covering. And I'm also covering for Jonathan, I'm also covering still at that point he is the information about the incident in on the previous night on Murphy's Forest and how he ended up in Nancy's home and everything. I'm also covering Jonathan to keep all that a secret from his mother. Solely because Johnson would be extremely concerned for the safety of his mother, especially member the understand, especially with Johnson having seen how traumatized Nancy was after showing up out of the portal in the tree, basically the last thing Johnson would be wanting at that point would be for right now would be at that point would be for Johnson, because Johnson would be only it would be far too sure for Johnson that if he even tells his mother about the incident in the previous night in the night in the Murphy's Forum and everything basically if he even tells that to his mother, then his mother either while Johnson would be at school or while Johnson would be sleeping the possibility of his mother basically all by herself going up to Murphy's Forest and searching around the trees and getting attacked or captured by the monster. Basically, Johnson would be seen so far ahead of such a possibility that I'm solely to keep his mother safe. I'm going to bring Jonathan to not say anything or reveal anything to Jonathan's mother at that point. It's a scenario that I'm going to bring. So Jonathan's mother not being able to realize that what was the situation that led to basically Jonathan ending up in Nancy's home in Nancy's home in Nancy's home. So I'm considering for Johnson getting spotted by his mother as well. It's the scenario that I'm considering. This is say the scenario that I'm considering right now. I'm not considering. So definitely I'm considering question right now is that by the time Bill's mother and Copper would be making it to Sharia home, at that point I'm also Sharia showing her daughter's photo to to Copper and Bill's mother. And I'm also bringing that photo photo of her daughter Jane, and that photo would definitely not be the photo of 11. It's definitely my consideration. Then I'm considering for Hopper's investigation, getting sidetracked once again, but Hopper singing the description of the girl who showed up at beneath the restaurant, basically Hopper totally thinking that it would be Jane, it would be the real daughter, even after seeing the photo of the real daughter, who says it solely because of Hopper haven't seen 11. So I was Hopper thinking it might be the real daughter Jane that would be the possessed person that might have showed up at the restaurant of Penny, and basically that way Hopper's investigation of will and this right now already got sidetracked into uh, do his investigation for Jane. So it should be once again getting sidetracked with Jane and 11 being two different persons. It's definitely my impression. Definitely my impression right now is that even those who already due to the door to Nancy's room being lost, Nancy's mother not having found Jonathan's person in Nancy's room. I'm also still I'm also Nancy's mother totally seen I'm also it would be safely while Johnson would be through the window. I'm also right now definitely will be through the window. Johnson will be stealthily trying to leave Nancy's home but and it would be like precisely like the way that Nancy would have totally told Jonathan by now. By the time that Jonathan is leaving, that's the scenario that I was. So like at that point, I was supporting like definitely Nancy's mother totally seeing that Jonathan leaving like their home, which like the scenario, and like Nancy's mother totally figuring out, realizing that basically Jonathan was in like Nancy's room the entire night, like basically like her figuring that out, like Nancy's mother realizing that precisely while Jonathan will be stealthily trying to like leave Nancy's home, was like the eventual scenario that ended up again. So like the female representation right now as for like the woman that has right now showed up to like class, like design speech of class like form, like definitely would be like for an team member, and like I'm like her right now trying to like through that her absolute disguise and like casual interaction, I'm right now to like her to like get information from class as to like who exactly it was that potentially uh, that had precisely using like the radio at like the school precisely when like the radio had malfunctioned. Like they believe that getting that information out of like class without like without using force to like the scenario that I'm delivering like I'm delivering like with that absolute stealth like her getting the information about like information through about like as to who those kids were like as to like basically right now without much delay like with her current attention itself able to something with like that absolute disguise and with that absolute skills and strength like I'm looking like her getting the information that it works especially the student Mike Dustin Lucas even then like I'm also bringing like that moment to like keep asking questions to like the to like class like the French teacher class to such and I'm good stealthy manner for us to like get information as to like because like to make class remember as to like the fourth person like obviously 11 so like I'm remembering like she might have wanted to know like the disguise in which like she might have only expected like a possibility of like with like 11 for 11 to be able to like enter into like housing school like this year there most likely might have has need to be like a disguise to be also around maybe like she was the thing so like I'm her questioning with herself, like her questioning even on her resistance to like defense teacher class and him like all of a sudden like remembering yes like there was like the cousin of like Mike or something and basically and him revealing that like about like Eleanor. I think her name was Eleanor or something along the lines like him saying so like I'm also um, and him even telling like that woman as to like how she looked as well, like getting all this information in like a selfie manner from like Spencer like by that woman member of like the team of runners like the scenario that I'm also putting right now to like happen. And I'm also putting like the very same woman would be like without much credit at all would be like certainly showing up to like my phone while I'm also putting like two other members of like runners team would be with their disguise as well would be showing up to like Lucas as well as the phone. And I'm also putting them with their absolute disguise like them like like basically getting like the it's like through that disguise kind of like a strategy would be what they would be using instead of like sports precisely because of like only because of like my Lucas and the thing being like the only key to like getting to 11 so like I'm just trying like so I'm keeping up the disguise and basically like interacting with like through that disguise and like the skill way of speaking and basically with the self and I'm just like eventually them ending up with like them being able to like talk to like Mike Lucas and Buckshit in the form like the scenario that I'm in private is definitely the scenario that I'm looking at. So like them during like the interaction like them totally like making it kind of like obvious that like basically like while maintaining their disguise and stealth like them like through their interaction like them interacting like runners team members like three of them like interacting to like Mike Lucas and the thing such a manner to like such a manner that like they're making it like that after they're making it obvious that they know about like them hiding 11 and basically that basically that they need to handle 11 right now as like if it's just see them but like their entire family would be like basically executed like along this line like basically there's like that absolute stealth like basically like the three like people who would be like in parental scenes would be talking to like MikeLucasQuarrel, like making that evidence through their stealthy interactions, like the scenario that I'm. But like even then, like I'm also doing like Mike Joseph and Dustin, like maybe like being able to that and then the different like them that maybe that's deciding to that and no matter how much they would be asking Mike Lucas and Dustin like I'm looking like them to that they don't know where they're in to like along the kind of like a scenario that I'm looking in the case of Lucas since like Lucas won't be like aware of like 11 being a thing like I'm looking like Lucas maybe that still I'm looking like Lucas being clever enough to be able to still like to those like key members of Pioneer like the scenario that I'm considering. So like at that point I'm considering like them like saying the sort of a dialogue as like a threat and then that as itself solely to like Microsoft understand and to give them the and I'm considering like quickly that without much delay or like Mike Lucas and things most likely meeting up and I'm considering like most likely being Mike that like you'll be telling Lucas and that like you don't have to worry at all that basically as long as like 11 not as long as like they are not able to find 11 like we are safe. So like my ambassador is already telling the understand that we have to find 11 and hide 11 before they would be able to like get to 11 like along this line like ambassador like Mike Lucas understand saying but like ambassador like still ambassador like Lucas being like this of whole like issue with like Mike and 11 numbers still not being over. So like ambassador like Lucas not agreeing to like help Mike and Dustin and like to find 11 and all that. So like ambassador like at that point like Mike and Dustin like deciding to like search for 11 like in like multiple spots with like the scenario that ambassador and straight away like definitely even after that selfie question ambassador like Brenner and his team would be totally on Mike Lucas and Dustin's trail. So like I was going this would be one thing like Mike even before setting out to like search for 11 at that point would be well aware of like the possibility of like them being like trailed or followed or being secretly spied upon. So it's definitely my opinion. So like I'm referring Mike coming up with like some sort of plan along with like including members of something it will be just Mike as well as something that will be heading to the Northwood Forest to like look for to search and find 11 but like I'm doing like Mike as well as something doing it doing there for search for 11 such in such a manner that I'm going to bring like them possibly maybe even freaking like Brenner's team members with like the scenario that I'm doing and maybe like I'm going to like Mike, Lucas and Dustin like getting their list guys and basically putting it in the bag and then the super like most likely Mike, Lucas and Mike and Dustin like most likely going to like some mall and basically in like the dressing room like them doing their list guys and basically like stealthily somehow managing to like leave the list guys like anyways it was a scenario that I'm looking only for things. So like that way like I'm looking like that maybe it would be like around the possibility where like I'm looking might as well as question like putting on like stealthily being able to like put on some which guys and basically freaking like the team members of Rhinos would be like spying on them and basically then that way eventually stealthily ending up entering into like the Northwest Forest and then also something like them totally searching for 11 and then I'm considering this entire time like after 11 going missing like I'm considering like 11 would out straight away head up to like after like 11 leaving my like I'm considering like 11 would out straight away head off seat into Northwood Forest and might have found like a castle bios that's the form of castle bios and there like 11 might have only seen like will like stop in like that little form of like gasifiers and basically like 11 might be like right now like the exact location of 11 would be precisely in that secret form of gasifiers. It's definitely not the way. So like I was explaining precisely as like Mike and Dustin would be like searching for 11 through Mustard Forest. Like I was going pointedly precisely during that time would be when like I'm looking for like uh Nancy as well as like Jonathan would be like heading off to Moscow for especially during that time to like especially use their whole using like blood to like base and do like the monster strategy like while they would be using their that strategy in like Moscow force like the Moscow force would be big enough that basically while Nancy and Lucas would be like while Nancy and like Jonathan would be using the strategy, like somewhere else in like Murphy for like Mike and Dustin would do something, frankly something for 11, like the scenario that I'm able to bring. Like the very impressions that like for like most likely for like Nancy and Jonathan, like the very next not day but like night as well, around like the very same time that they had basically seen the monster like the where like Nancy had seen like the monster like the in the like the battlefield and seen like the monster like the previous night. Around that time like I was doing uh like Nancy and Jonathan like the next day as well leaving to like Mudwood steadily going off to like Mudwood Forest and time like I was doing like using blood like I was doing like them like actually like the monster like showing up and basically trying to attack the scenario attack or like attack the scenario that I was referring to like at that point Jonathan would be using his weapon would be trying to like attack like the monster, but like I'm still not even facing the monster. So like I'm afraid that while they would be struggling, I'm afraid like most likely that the dog of like Will and Jonathan like which might have been like gotten by like I'm wondering at that point, Jonathan as well as Nancy possibly being like close to like Captain Bio would be like the scenario that I was maybe like with like the monster showing up and like Nancy and Jonathan trying to like attack the monster and basically that totally fading and basically the monster chasing after like Nancy and Jonathan and basically as they would be like running deep into like the monster forest like them would be like by the time eventually like the monster would be catching up to like Nancy and Jonathan would be like capturing or like attacking one of them or he would be even about to take the life of one of them like I was maybe at that point like maybe that location would be close to like where castle buyers would be so like I was maybe at that point like Will and Jonathan's like dog like basically that's showing up to like save Jonathan. It's also like a possible scenario that I'm saying. So like I'm wondering like maybe that like monster at that point like getting distracted and attacking the dog and like possibly that dog dying at that point by the monster. It's also like a possibility that I'm wondering. So like at that point like basically Jonathan once again trying to like attack like the monster but like the monster would be like maybe this time like maybe like grabbing like and pulling Jonathan and basically would Jonathan would be dragging and would be taking away. And maybe at that point, like I was bring like 11 showing up and basically 11 until then would be like totally extremely scared and would be well aware of all these things happening, but like would be so extremely scared of like basically like showing up in front of like the monster. So like at that point, like by then like 11 finally getting up the courage and 11 showing up there and 11 like using 11's like superpowers like basically scaring like the monster and basically like the monster leading through like the purpose from the time being. Like the scenario that I'm also sort of like. And while all this with like all this noise and everything like also going like Mike and Dustin who would be like especially during that time would be searching for 11 in food shops in the middle of the night during that exact time like them totally just like this whole noise and everything of like lack of like the whole fight against like the monster like that totally like my kind of spin-up they would do something for 11 and like muscle for them hearing all this noise and then throwing up so like because there's like the monster would be like escaping through the portal like by then like obviously Mike as well as something showing up and like at that point like basically Jordan and Nancy we confused as to like who this kid is with like the super powers and everything. So like at that point like Mike as well as Justin as well only being talked with seeing 11 right there like basically and basically the whole possibility delivering like possibly like the exchange of information happening in like as to like who 11 is and to like Nancy like definitely Mike would be asking like Nancy and just asking like what happened like this and then like and by then like they would be Mike Nancy as well as like Jonathan would be having injuries as well with like the whole fight against like the monster and everything so like Mike and Dustin asking them what happened and basically like the way Mike and Jacob would Mike and Dustin would be shocked at seeing 11 and to like how much Mike would be relieved at seeing 11 like basically all this like Jonathan as well as Nancy as well would be noticing this so like I was feeling like that way like at that point would be when I was feeling maybe like the interactions serious interactions happening and like the exchange of information from like Nancy and Jonathan to like Mike and Dustin and from Mike and Dustin and 11 to like all of them like really like that whole exchange of information happening at that point. It's also like a possibility that I'm able to So definitely not it's a prediction right now that basically as for like Jonathan like not informing not bothering to like inform Hopper like or like therefore like even with their initial hunt for like the monster in like Northwood Fox as well along with like Nancy and Jonathan like even then like basically Jonathan the fact that Jonathan didn't reach out didn't bother to like reach out to like Hopper and was like even like the next night as well like I was like it will be just Jonathan and Nancy alone, like heading off to like the Mother Forest. Even after like their experience, like and also bring like them, it will be just once again them to like alone, like that will be heading back to Mother Forest to like to either to take the life of like the monster or like to enter in like the battle. But definitely it will be just Jonathan and Nancy alone that will be heading off to like Mother Forest, and then also like it will be Jonathan not even right now, even to this point, like Jonathan decided not to, like Jonathan not seeking the help of like or reaching out to Hopper would be maybe due to like Nancy, maybe like Jonathan would be feeling out of like Hopper would won't be believing Jonathan, won't be able to like believe Jonathan might be along the way. Jonathan would be like assuming it's definitely my from 300 positions. Like I think like the last time Jonathan had seen Hopper, like basically Jonathan as well as like Hopper, I think like was trying to like make Jonathan's mother like believe that like will like no more. So like I'm just like since like the last time Jonathan might have seen Hopper might have been at that point. But like Jonathan might be only feeling as if like Hopper won't be believing able to like believe Jonathan. So like this might be the sort of reason for like maybe Johnson not reaching out to Hopper and maybe like Johnson goes to like maybe even asking Nancy if like should we reach out to like the police like maybe like of Hopper like if- but like I'm supposed to bring Nancy straight away telling Johnson that basically that's just pointless, especially because of like Nancy having believes like Nancy already having interacted and talked to like the sheriff like the police and basically with like the way they are responded, like basically Nancy will be like totally fearing as if like basically that it will be pointless to like tell them about like all the happening that like they won't be receiving any of the help. So like I was bringing Nancy as still like strongly telling Jonathan that like it's like of no use, it's like pointless that like we are we are like we only have each other to like basically depend on for like this like whole for to like rescue Barbara and will like along the lines like Nancy telling Jonathan and that way basically Jonathan like the second time as well possibly like maybe that being the reason for like Jonathan even like for the second time heading off to like the forms of Northwood in like the middle of the night like without informing or like letting like Sheriff Hopper know of it or reaching out to like help from like Sheriff Hopper. It's also like an eventual scenario of like that ambassador of the Pagana. So like definitely not the Korean question right now, but like the person right now telling Mike that they are going to find 11 like right then itself like the 11 wake with like 11 waking up in like the room in like Renault's laboratory. That I'm considering like this would be either 11. Definitely, I'm still thinking about the preparation that like the current location of 11 will be definitely in Captain Bio. Definitely remember. As for like what would be the current thing I'm preparing, like it will be precisely 11 dreaming, like 11 having a dream about like her days while she was trapped in that Renault's laboratory. That would be what I would be right now. So it's definitely not the impression. So like either that or like 11 remembering her days. Like it might not be her dreaming, but like her while being all alone in like a castle by of like her totally remembering like as usual like basically her 11 remembering like the her past days when uh, her past when like she was trapped in like a runner's laboratory and well with like all the things with like 11 like and the experience and everything. So you only either 11 are remembering all that or like 11 right now dreaming. It's definitely one of the but 11 right now would definitely be in like cabin bio. It's definitely one of the ambition. That's all like definitely one of the ambition right now with like Lucas right now like taking the decision to like search for well using the combat by himself like and those are definitely Mike and definitely ambassador right now deciding to like since Mike and Dustin want to find 11 first leg and was going like definitely Mike and Dustin come to the decision to like basically without like Lucas realizing like I'm the different like Mike and Dustin only deciding to like totally go along with Lucas but like their intent would be like as they would be like following using the compass as like Lucas will be uh, using the compass like I'm considering like Mike and Dustin going around with like Lucas and Amber. Their intent, Mike and Dustin's intent would be to like search for like 11 along the way. It's definitely I'm considering Amberson. So that's like the scenario that I'm considering. So like I'm considering definitely the compass totally from Lucas. So like definitely I'm considering like the compass like taking Lucas deep into Mustard Forest is definitely the scenario that I'm considering that Mustard Forest definitely will be have to be crossed in order for them to be able to like uh, get like get to like the final location of where like the compass would be pointing to, which will be precisely like Brennan's energy laboratory. This is like my primary impression. So definitely according to my primary impression, so some of the only thing like it like through like the compass leading like Lucas might end up stick to like the deep into like the market for so that's like the scenario that I'm considering. I'm considering like the like music being like playing in like Nancy's home. Like I'm just in Nancy's room. I'm just definitely Nancy and Jonathan might have already left to Merkel's forest to like use their like base strategy to like catch up like the monsters definitely member climate. So like definitely that strategy of like Nancy as well as like Jonathan totally failing like the scenario that I'm considering, especially because of like the currently, there would be only like a single monster that would be like showing up to like the Boston Mercode and that monster will be showing up every night around like 8 to 8:30 time period, and basically it would be like only returning back to like the parallel world like precisely before like by the time it's 8:30, definitely my base impression. So like between 8 and 8:30 would be the time period when it would be like hunting in like the fox in Marco, like also definitely my base impression. So definitely like Jonathan as well as Nancy right now missing from like Nancy's room. Like I'm looking like it would be most likely like Jonathan and Nancy might have finally decided, like, even though Nancy was talking about, like, most likely, like, the monster possibly being okay, hunting during nighttime, I'm considering, like, they might have already decided to basically right now set the dog to, like, Mustard for precisely because, like, maybe Nancy might have felt that basically, like, leaving home during night would be, like, extremely would not be possible for Nancy. But like Nancy's mom always like always after like Nancy. So like I'm from like maybe and maybe it also might have to do with like Nancy and John, but maybe deciding to like basically do a lot of preparation before like it's night time in like Northwood Forest, so, like for them to be well prepared in like Northwood Forest before it's like night time. Maybe like Ambassador like Nancy and Jonathan would have already left to like Northwood Forest by now. It's definitely Ambassador MS. So like Ambassador like definitely like Lucas currently right now like Lucas like Lucas Dustin and Lucas will be using the compass trying to like uh going through like Mudwood Forest, like the compass will be only leading Lucas through Mudwood Forest, and like Mike and Dustin will be along with like Lucas and also like them totally like Lucas' journey like stopping midway by like this like the scenario that I'm assuming, and that will be most likely through like them totally running into like Nancy and Johnson in like deep within like what before is like the scenario that I'm going to be. So like at that point I'm going to rotate like an open scenario between like the group of like Jonathan and like Nancy and like Mike, Lucas and Dustin were like and considering like both those two groups would be like lying to each other about like why they are right now they are within like the box of Mark especially my comprehension go like I'm preferring both of them to like to each other, and I'm preferring like Nancy as well as Mike totally like interacting between each other and totally agreeing on on their deal to like basically to keep this a secret that basically they had like that they saw each other in like Market Forest like basically is like the scenario that Ambrose is delivering, and that would be like the reason for like Ambrose bring like that being like a reason Ambrose bring like the that like Ambrose bring like might end up since like using that incident to like basically somehow struggle their way into like convincing Lucas to like stop it, the first like compass journey, definitely when we remember so like considering like Mike and Dustin totally repeatedly telling stuff that basically like that since we ran into like Jonathan and Nancy, like they would definitely be the positive like them totally spying on their combat journey would be like high in the along the lines like Dustin as well as like Dustin as well as like Mike would be like eventually convincing Lucas and that's where like I'm going to realize them their whole journey, Lucas' whole journey was like the compass like ending that way. It's like the scenario for like the time which time being of like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like definitely on the story introduction right now for like 411 right now building a port of courage and basically entering into straight away entering into like the supermarket like I'm also like it would be solely due to like 11 being like so extremely that much extremely hungry is definitely going to be a function. So like 11 might have not been able to like eat anything at all after like basically leaving from like my home. It's definitely like the compass is definitely my best memory. So like I'm definitely like 11 for 11 right now would be like so extremely hungry and like I'm like right now this like the situation being like 11 entering like supermarket and everyone there like basically like noticing 11 like basically all of their attention falling on to 11 like I'm looking like definitely the scenario that I'm preparing is basically like right now my personal impression right now is like right now itself like basically after entering a supermarket like 11 thinking of like her memories of like the days when like of like the experiment in like Brenner's laboratory rushing in like especially inside experiment like with like Brenner right now telling 11 schools that they will be reaching out to you, it's trying to reach out to you like basically it would be precisely due to that it would be like Brenner would be totally talking about like the first time that 11 might have through that whole water thing has like made like the communication and basically connection and basically had heard like the Russian man talking like and so also the remember the person that like that Russian man that everyone had seen talking in some uh at dark area like I'm specifically that dark area would be like the middle like intermediate area between like the real world and like the parallel dimension especially when the friend that would be that fully dark area without with that absolute void something when the friend was there. 11 precisely seeing that Russian man due to like that photo of that person that basically that Abraham had showed 11 like my sister impressions that like definitely that photo would be exactly the photo of that I think like that photo was exactly the photo of that precise person who was like sitting on like a room that was like only at a at some distance within like Pranav laboratory while in like the very beginning like 11 had basically made her was able to like successfully maintain make a communication and basically remote communication and basically say the exact words that person was saying like and that person might have been just like a member of that Pranav team in like the good photos that Pranav even back then had shown 11 like that person might have been in like the real world while he would be most likely just a member of that Pranav team like I'm referring like in like the parallel world its parallel version would be like the Russian respectively would be interested. So there would be that difference between that even like the people in like the real world, even though their parallel worlds will be like looking identical to them, like their roles and like and their roles, their job in like the parallel world, like all that will be totally different. The Stephanie Rivers, the thing that had happened to them, all that will be totally different. Then comparing to like the real world and parallel world, Stephanie Rivers would be amazing. So like another thing right now was like runner telling 11 that basically someone that it's trying to reach out to 11 like Brenner would be totally referring to that point where like basically like when 11 had heard the Russian man speaking and basically at that point like so like the monster like showing up like monster's voice like basically sharing 11 like and those like this would be exactly what like Brenner you're right now telling 11 like this would be like the next try after that try through like the water communication especially when with the impression so this time like and my the impression that like so Brenner would be like totally spot on about like that monster creature like trying to like genuinely reach out to like 11 like it wants to like communicate with 11 in that dark voice area definitely where with Remington to be precisely and solely due to like that monster creature like most likely being like the parallel world version of 11 like solely due to like the parallel version of like like the parallel world. It's like experiment going wrong. Like it might have been definitely like the parallel version of 11 that might have turned into that monster. It's definitely my premise. So like I'm assuming like while 11 was like communicating with like uh, uh, the parallel version of that man who was like who might have been like the Russian person man like that Russian clear person like I'm considering like right then like I'm considering like the parallel version of 11 who might have been like turned into like that monster creature like it might have only been able to like sense and see 11 through like that dark void of space and they are like at on seeing 11 like it might have only been able to like recognize for even if it was for like a brief moment like on seeing 11 like it might have been able to recognize like the lookalike of 11 to that monster through self like but because my comprehension that like, the monster is like was initially like the battle version of 11 so like it that that person before turning into a monster due to like Prana's experiment going wrong. Before that, like that person might not only look exactly identical to 11 definitely on the brain. And this might be the sole reason for that monster in like the dark void trying to communicate and reach out to like 11. So definitely my footprint because like it might have only like seeing 11 like it might have only maybe for like a brief moment remembered it's like true self. The monster might not remember it's like true self. It's definitely my person to remember like definitely my personal impression for like definitely even this time like I'm also running like but like for now giving like the confidence to trying to give the confidence to like 11 to like get 11 to through that experiment to like communicate with like the monster like I'm also going like this time like I'm also will the scenario to be like while 11 will be like going to the task void like area like they're like the monster once again trying to like communicate and at that point like 11 would only be able to like spend only a few seconds in that, only a few seconds in that dark void before like 11 would be like clearly seeing what that monster looks like. And because that dark void like initially voice of like that dark monster 11 hearings and then I was looking like that monster like basically showing up into like the dark void, even though it would be just like exactly like the Russian man, it would be just like uh, that like even though Eleven would be able to like see that star that monster like still even though like the monster won't be able to like touch 11 still able to bring like seeing the true form of like that monster will be far too extremely scary for like 11 and what else wrong type 11 that basically 11 quickly at that point itself like basically screaming and basically might have totally that way like that extent might have ended at that point. It might have been what might have happened if the remember the innocent. So like right now with that 11 like remembering having those memories and remembering like 11 like basically like when 11 would be remembering to the point till the point where like 11 would have only screamed on seeing like the monsters so on like in that dark world like 11 at that point I was bring waking back up to like reality to the present while 11 would be standing in that market and like something like 11 being totally shocked and like 11 getting shocked like basically even on top of that like basically everyone once again like the people present in that supermarket like noticing once again like carefully staring at like 11 at that point is like the scenario that I'm considering. So like 11 I'm considering at that point quickly deciding to like basically I'm considering at that point 11 quickly taking like food like some sort of like a bread or like something that would be present in that market like 11 quickly taking that and 11 quickly running away from that trying to like run away from that supermarket like the scenario that I'm considering. So like right then itself I'm considering like the security guards in that supermarket like them totally trying to catch up 11 is like the scenario that I'm considering. So like 11 right then itself using 11 superpower and basically quickly like getting away and running away with that package of food is like the scenario that I'm considering. Uh, so like I'm considering maybe like a few people in like that market uh, having seen like 11 like basically a kid like basically like 11 like easily like shaking away the security guards like basically as they catch us up like basically maybe like there being like few eyewitness to that. It's also like a possibility that I'm considering. Anyway, like 11 running out of like supermarket is like the scenario that I'm considering. And 11 I'm considering like for 11 like only running away. And as 11 would be running like the security guards would be chasing after 11. So like at that point I was considering like 11 totally running into like the forest that would be nearby and that would be like immersive forest. It's like the scenario that I'm considering. So like 11 at that point running deep into Market Forest while holding that food package. And I'm considering like after a while like the security guards won't be not being able to like keep up. Or like I'm considering like the 10 like the forest like 11 as like maybe like the security guards like catching up to 11, but like and then at that point it's a state to send like the forest like 11 once again using like 11 like to the forest and basically that's stopping like the security guards and basically like 11 running deep into like the forest in Markwood and maybe at that point would be when precisely when 11 would be entering deeper and deeper into like the Markwood forest and running deeper into like the Markwood forest. Like at that point, like precisely at that point would be the time when like I'm considering like Nancy and Johnson would have totally ran into Mike Lucas and Dustin deep within like the Markwood forest is definitely my memory and version. So like while they would be having their awkward conversation and interaction while like each of them would be like trying desperately to like hide the truth behind why they are in like mustard forest during that exact time. And while they would all be like saying all sorts of lies and trying to like hide the true reason why they are here. Like precisely during the land of that and them totally dying to each other and agreeing that basically that none of them say anything about like seeing each other to their home, like literally to their parents and along the line. And as they would be like about to leave, like I'm considering maybe like it would be at that point that I'm considering like 11 would be running all the way into like making it to that first location. So like at that point, like the two of them like basically being shocked by seeing 11, like the two parties, like the two groups, like the group of like Nancy as well as Johnson as well as like the group of like Dustin, Luther as well as like Mike totally being shocked by seeing 11 showing up right there. It's like the scenario that I'm considering. So like if that's the scenario, then I'm considering like 11 showing up like at that point, like I'm considering like them maybe not being able to like hide like the information, everything they know so far. Basically, like Nancy straight away asking Mike as to like who this girl is like as like Mike will be like totally relieved like seeing like 11 maybe Mike even hunting 11 like maybe that happening and basically Nancy asking Mike as to like who this girl is and basically like maybe that whole situation eventually resulting in like Johnson as well as like Nancy as well as like Mike Lucas and Dustin and all of them like exchanging information. It's also like a powerful scenario that I'm looking forward to and looking to them. So like definitely now the very impression right now with like 11 leading like the supermarket with like the food packages like and the super like definitely right now it's like I'm looking like the people in like the supermarket like straight away calling like the police and then also bring yeah like I'm looking at estimations like for right now away with like maximum to like look for like very high like I'm so we totally still like Copper would totally want that photo of that Jane like after that to find out something like what Jane looks like if she has like a bus cut or not like basically and definitely even if she doesn't have like a bus cut still like definitely like the photo like Hopper would want to know like what her dog looks like so that like Hopper could like find that missing person in things like Hopper would only believing that like that the real stuff Jane would definitely that kid that who's like even parts of her clothes that was even found in that tunnel and all that like even though but like Hopper would be like totally and the like the size girl with like the mustard and like Dennis and all that like basically like Hopper would be totally absolutely sure that that girl would definitely be Jane. But like I'm pretty remember the impression that like Jane won't be 11. It's definitely not the impression. So and Jane would have totally died as well. It's definitely not the impression. And also like right now with like the since like Hopper is away, like I'm assuming like the people at the supermarket like as they would be spotting like the police like I'm assuming it to be precisely Hopper's subordinates that will be showing up to like the supermarket and I'm assuming like them to not be like show up in like another manner like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing like them maybe like taking their time is like about the scenario that I'm doing. So for the scenario to be, and I'm doing like by the time like the subordinates of offer would be making it to like the supermarket. Like even before that, like I'm thinking like suddenly Brenner's team would have would feel like only tapping like the phone call to like the station. The delivery was remote. So like I'm thinking like even by the time like the offer subordinate would be able to like make it to like the market and looking between Brenner and his team like not Brenner but like his Brenner's team would have already showed up to like supermarket and might have totally like taken all the CCTV. They might have showed up disguised as like police officers, and I'm wondering they would have totally taken all the CCTV tape from like the footage from like the market, like the scenario that I'm wondering. So like so basically as like Hopper subordinate will be showing up to like the market, like I'm wondering like there won't be like any CCTV footages, and I'm wondering them totally being confused when like confused with like the shop owner like telling them that basically the cops had already showed up and left with like the CCTV footage. Like so at that point like cops like subordinate being confused with like the scenario that I'm doing. Yet like I'm doing like them but like the people who saw like basically 11 like using like basically the door like the outer door of like the automatic door of like the supermarket like quickly shutting and basically the glass breaking by the 11 was leaving like so they would be like the ones who saw that would be like kind of finding it like kind of like maybe disturbing that like the dog reacted in such a manner and everything that Eleven did in that supermarket like maybe like might have like created like a sort of suspicion and confusion within like the people that might have seen that like still I'm considering for like the subordinates of like copper that will be showing up at that then I'm considering once again being like totally casual about it and I'm considering like them totally assuming that basically it might have been definitely some malfunctioning of like the automatic door of like the supermarket that might have caused like the door glass to like break and all that to happen. Would be along the lines and possible like them to like actually assume and there was supervising like the subordinates of Hopper like totally to given like the excuse eventually that like it was like people from like the states that basically took care of it would be around the lines and considering and like I'm looking like proper subordinate and once again being casual about it that like okay so like that as if like they are taking care of it and basically them not at all like feeling anything suspicious or like looking when bothered to like looking through it is like what I'm basically putting out of like of a subordinate right now in like the current situation, especially the scenario that I'm looking at. So and my very impression is like it would be like after like Popper would be getting like the finding like the photo of like Jane. So like the very impression so that like eventually that once like Popper would be getting out and getting all the information about like Jane from Theory like and once like Popper would be returning back to his place in Hawkins like at that point I was wondering like uh Popper would be totally like what Popper will be showing up and referring like even after like it won't be just straight away as Popper will be showing up like I was like even after Popper showing up and basically by Popper will be in the station and also like the two subordinates of like Popper like I was like casually telling Popper like or like Popper like caring about the interaction between like the subordinates about like this whole incident in like the supermarket or like them casually telling Popper about it and basically that like there was this girl with like the was like a bus haircut and there was even like subordinates possibly even having already forgotten about like the fiction of like the girl with like bus haircut by her I think like basically like then top of is just like casual interaction between like the subordinates at that point like proper like shockingly usually like quickly heading off to like the supermarket at that point like the scenario that I was looking and like proper quickly asking like the shop owner as to like basically proper would be taking the photo of Jane and basically like would be totally which we would have got from the race and then the like proper totally quickly showing like the owner of like, the supermarket that she like basically just was like triggered use of in like the supermarket like basically and basically them saying that no it wasn't her. Just like the scenario that I'm about to bring. And at that point, about to bring like copper totally being even more confused. That like basically Hopper getting like another major obstacle in his like investigation, and Hopper being like totally confused and like clueless as to like what's happening. And basically the person just missing the this missing person the entire time that right now after figuring out like Hopper feeling as if like Hopper was like this entire time wa- uh, was working for like the person Hopper thought like was working was not well. Basically that person that Hopper from that point on thought of like the real sort of not being it's not the real sort of would be like the realization that would be happening for Hopper at that point. So like at that point that extreme confusion would happen for like Hopper, and Hopper being like only close the trust to like what's going on like basically that much of like the kind of like eventual scenario that I'm looking at between. So like the feeling of the very impression right now is that like back when like careers was working at my culture, and the something like careers might have been like the brightest angel that might have been working at my culture. Those kind of setting up the brain, but so as Pranav might have been like the two individuals among male, like the one with like the highest IQ might have been in my culture back then might have been Pranav, and uh, among females that's the highest the person with like the highest IQ might have been Sharia. It's definitely might have been so like it might have definitely been Pranav as well as Sharia is the child that Pranav might have had with like Sharia that might have been 11. Definitely might have been impression. So definitely like career experiments like with like careers right now revealing that like careers like possibly having went through like the very same experiment that 11 like I'm referring like, that time definitely obviously it might have been like the failures like the students careers might have not succeeded in like the communicating to like through like the sort what thing like basically communicating into like the battle world. That experience might have like careers might have failed at that. Definitely was a premise. Yet like I was through the all the experiments that like of run of that careers might have probably went through. Careers might have gained a lot of like psychic powers. Definitely my personal impression as for what might have happened. Like careers might have gained certain powers is definitely my preference. It might not be of like the same intensity as that of 11, and it might have not been as like the very same intensity as that of 11, and it might not even be like the same powers as that of 11. Yet, like I'm affected through Brenner's experiments, like even though currently careers doesn't speak for like maybe can't speak, like still I'm different like careers, this would be having like powers that will be powerful. That's really I'm talking about like at the real like right now saying all these things that basically that this lecture is being confident that like 11 will be returning like I'm talking like it might certainly have to do with more than lecture here having just witnessed like 11 like superhuman like powers like that 11 can do with her mind alone like I'm talking like maybe the real herself might have like powers that might be different to 11 like over enough experiments like the power story I might have gained might be like the power to power to like see it to like the future. It's also like a limit of variables, and maybe future prediction might be a power that career might have. It's definitely my suspension. It might be the reason for like careers right now. Totally be certain that like 11 would return one day. It's definitely my impression. That not 11, but like that chain would return one day to career. It's definitely my impression because like my impression that like careers right now itself using her unique powers like future seeing ability powers like future sight powers like she would be having that. So that like she will be able to like even see that very day when like probably 11 will eventually solely due to that extreme effort that like everyone like Mike and his friends as well as Nancy Johnson as well as Hopper like all of them would be doing like collectively eventually like basically 11 finally ending up with like career like would be like one thing it would be that future and that day when that happens like maybe careers already might be able to like see that. So definitely my was the example like career it's even keeping that silent would be also having that meaning like even careers remaining silent would have a lot of meaning. Like maybe it might also have to do, might not just be like it might not be even the trauma that we also like about that emotion. Maybe like careers remaining silent and not speaking to anyone would be completely because of careers be aware that they will even saying anything to like about the things he knows. Will like anyone who only makes the other thing, people think that she's crazy and that they won't be able to like understand maybe along the lines the race might be thinking. So like if the race would be feeling that it would be pointless to fail as a race to like say anything to like the people around her about like the things she knows. And also like even with like right now with like Hopper as well as like Will's mother even showing up to like Syria to the Syria and basically he was speaking to trying to communicate with Syria like Will's mother even showing support of Will to Syria. Will Syria would be consciously remaining silent. Even though Syria could only speak and tell like Hopper as well as like Will's mother think she knows like still like her remaining silent would be maybe due to like her feeling that basically maybe if she says the things we know right now to like Hopper as well as Will's mother, like on top of instead of it being helpful for them, like it might totally change like the future that she already have seen. And basically that might even result in maybe like things backfiring to the point that like Jane might her precious daughter, Jane might not even end up eventually ending up ending up by that side, like basically like to be along the lines the reacting be thinking it's also definitely my the emergence. So like I'm assuming the revenge might be also be right now itself would be able to like see into the future and see might have already seen like basically this mother like Will being saved, Copper saving Will as well as Barbara and all that like already the reacts might have been able to see all that definitely my opinion. So like precisely to not mess with like the future and totally for like nothing to happen to the future, no change to happen to the future, so that like so that like the possibility of like us not being able to like get Jane eventually by her side, like basically to avoid such a consequence from happening would be like the precise reason for like possibly career consciously remaining would be like right now remaining silent in front of everyone. It's definitely also like a possibility that I'm looking for again history mention. Like the claim of three operations right now is also that basically eventually like the distinct future when like Hopper only find this saving the land through that process finding like Brenner would be like either Brenner would be dying by the monster or like Brenner would be brought to justice like basically regardless like eventually find this once like Bill would be saved and all of the others like Barbara as well like also and the others who would be like by then maybe being abducted getting abducted by like the monster like by the time like each and every single one of them would be like finally saved like and brought back to the real world. At that point, like basically by then like Hopper would be totally bringing 11 to like careers. And at that point, I'm talking about like Hopper, possibly Will's mother as well would be the side Hopper at that point. And like Hopper as well as like Will's mother would be totally hoping that basically seeing Jane, like basically careers would be finally be able to be okay would be along the line proper and as well as like with another room only thing until that point. And like once they sorry like 11 to something like the final scenario where like proper as well as possibly with another like maybe together bringing like 11 to uh, maybe along with been like basically bringing 11 to maybe Mike and Dolson would be there like so like more bringing in the collectively finally happy that like they were finally able to like save everyone who had been trapped in like the battle world. So they would all be possibly together bringing 11 and they would be so feeling so grateful for 11 for like but because like by then 11 would have helped a lot in that in enabling them to save all of them from like the battle world and all that. Right then it's like the scenario that I was looking. So like they would all be like under the for they would like them all collectively bringing 11 to like Terrier's home. And at that point, like the moment Terrier will be seeing 11, like like precisely like it's turning on Terrier straight away like acting normal. It's like a scenario that I'm wondering, and that being like that ultimate shock for like all of them, like include for like all of them, like the ones among them had would be knowing about like by then would be knowing about like Terrier and like the fact that like demonstratory is not demonstratory is like is basically like totally having issues and basically like they would all be thinking it along such manner but like when Taria would be seeing like 11 like at that point like Taria is still acting normal and saying that really I knew this day would come like I knew it would happen like and Taria is like acting like maybe like uh, So it's really normal that instantly that basically at that point, like basically all of them like Hopper and Vince mother and all of them being shocked at the realization that within that time that Ferrier was like putting on a fake act as if like she has as if like she couldn't speak and all that. It's basically like giving the final uh twist of like a shocking scenario that ends up bringing another three impression right. So definitely my three impression that is sitting on to that like it's the reason for like 11 run up calling like naming 11 as like 11 only precisely because of like 11 being like the 11 that subject for like runner experiment and like might have been like the 11th time that basically runner might have finally been able to like succeed in his experiment through 11 and that would be like the first reason for like 11 namely 11. So like I'm referring to the first 10 test subjects in which like 11 might have in which like runner might have done this like experiment would have or failed at like runner's experiment. So it's definitely my brain. So like I'm referring my 2003 impressions definitely for like the possibility of like Surrey is possibly being like number nine, like the ninth experiment that might have failed, and maybe at that point might have been when like a runner might have decided to like have a child with like Surrey, and so like 11 might have born, and then like it might have been precisely like runner then might have been patiently waiting for like 11 to like grow up and reach like the age in which like 11 would be like old enough to be able to so that like at that point like Brenner might have felt that like Brenner like needs to like grow up and would and reach like a certain age before like Brenner could like start to like experiment on 11. It's definitely my memory ambition. So like until then, so like in between this gap as it is 11 was growing up, that might be like the point where like the 10th experiment might have been done and the 10th experiment might have been Sarah. It's definitely my ambition. So like unlike in like Terrier's case, like I'm like in Terrier's case, like even though Terrier's might have totally even though foreigners experiments might have been a failure in like Terrier's case, like I'm like yet like Terrier's might yet like Terrier's survive like I'm in the case of Sarah, like I'm through foreigners experiment failing, like I'm Sarah might have died due to that kind of experiment being a failure. So definitely my positive impression that might have been happened. And Sarah might have been like usually the 10th uh, experimental subject of like Brenner, which like Brenner might have abducted and Sarah and done the experiment. Definitely my positive impression. So like basically like Sarah might have been like definitely Brenner like simply like waiting while Brenner might have been waiting for like 11 to grow up like Brenner might have in between that time period like might have lost his patience and so like that might be the reason for like Brenner possibly deciding to like abduct Sarah and like try out like another test subject to see if it will work and in like the case of Sarah as well like it might have failed and so like the 10th experiment as of Brenner as well might have failed and like that resulting in like Sarah dying might have been what might have happened in like the past is definitely my very so that Lena is very understand right now with like this is issue with like Mike and 11 being like related jealousy towards like 11. Uh, for like my 11, my friendship with like 11 numbers, definitely while Elizabeth had just now told Mike that she's going to go alone to using the compass, like he's going to like go alone to like find Bill. Like at that point, I was like Lucas might have already expected like Mike to like abandon 11 and basically go along, decide to like go along with like Lucas. Might have been what Lucas might have expecting, but like that might have totally backfired on Lucas might have been what like Lucas might have felt. And that might have created that like frustration in Lucas, which might have put Lucas to like still go off to like the combat by himself to like find them. Never the version and what might have happened if the never version. So definitely still but like with like Mike and Dustin on their bicycle like basically heading off somewhere like it won't be just that they would be like completely on their bicycle at that point like potentially heading to they would also be having their compasses by with that it's also definitely my premise. So like Mike and Dustin in their bicycle might have been heading off to like basically accompany Lucas might have been what they might have been doing at that point. That might have been intending on doing at that point. It's definitely not a frame. But like with them seeing like the crowd in front of the supermarket, like I'm just that distraction, like resulting in like Mike and Dustin basically staying there in like the in front of like the supermarket trying to find out about like what happened and all that. Like, but the thing is, while that will be happening, about thing is like Lucas using like the compass might have by then number 22 or already reached like Murwood Forest, like the compass leading Lucas to Murwood Forest, and I'm like as Lucas would be like the compass would be taking Lucas deep into like the Murwood Forest and would be just Lucas by himself at that point. And I'm just think like Lucas being attacked by not the monster, but like I'm assuming like Lucas at that point being attacked by Lucas seeing what like deep within like the Murwood Forest is like the scenario that I'm looking for. And at that point, like Lucas being extremely scared for his life, is like the scenario that I'm looking. Lucas are running from like the wolves and like the wolves usually gaining on like Lucas and Lucas not being able to get away, and Lucas would be so extremely scared for his life when precisely and thing like by then like 11 would have totally like stealing like the food package, like 11 would have totally ran into like Murwood Forest. So like at that point precisely 11 would be like totally running into like Lucas uh, like 11 would be totally seeing like Lucas being chased after by those wolves. So like I'm looking for next precisely as like Lucas won't be able to like, get away from like the wolves, and like then Lucas will be about to Lucas would be totally think that he's like so and so will be so scared and will be thinking that he's about to die by the wolves. At that point, I'm also putting 11 precisely showing up and 11 precisely using 11 like superpowers like stopping like the wolf and attacking like the wolf, and like basically the wolf like getting scared and like running away is like the scenario that I'm looking that way, like 11 saving and like 11 saving like Lucas's life is like the scenario that I'm about to bring, and that like I'm about to bring that would be kind of like at that point I'm liberating Lucas being like totally at that point Lucas totally being so extremely grateful for like 11 at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking, and Lucas at that point like that incident like that saving of 11 by Lucas is like the scenario that I'm 11 saving Lucas just in such a manner like the scenario that I'm looking, and that would be what like, and by then like I'm different like Mike and Dustin would have like uh would have Mike by then like would have thought like basically like 11 might be like since the first time they had seen 11 was in like Market Forest, like was maybe Mike at that point telling Dustin that basically after looking into things that had happened in like supermarket, like I'm considering like and I was wondering like what forest would be nearby to that supermarket as well. So like Mike probably thinking about like the first time they had seen 11 being precisely in like Northwood Forest. So like Mike can at that point think of going to that exact spot in like Northwood Forest where they had first seen found 11. So like I'm looking them going there and they're them totally seeing like cheerful Lucas decide like 11 is like the scenario that I'm considering. And at that point, I'm considering like Lucas himself like telling Mike and Dustin and 11, sorry, maybe. And like basically Lucas telling Mike that basically 11 is like part of like our team, like our friendship group is like along the lines like Lucas telling Mike at that point. And with that, like Lucas is jealousy as well towards like 11 as well being gone with that. It's like the eventual possible scenario that I'm considering. I'm considering. So the remember impressions were like things like look at the moment Lucas by himself that like set off to like find will like the moment he stepped out from his home itself, like basically him being watched by that like one of like the member of like Brenner's team, like one of like the police guy, kind of like a state member from like Brenner's team being there, like I'm just like he will be always spying on like by then itself, like I'm just like the names of like the students of Hawkins who are like totally interested in like science, like basically that name by then would have probably been revealed by that science teacher to that woman from like Brenner's team. So like I'm just she might have totally straight away found out like the address of like those tech students, and but like uh, might have ordered his like team members to like he might have sent his team members to like basically spy on like the in front of spy and stand in front of like the home of like those exact students, and that might be the person. So there's a reason for like by the time Lucas even like stepped out of his home, like basically one of one of like the person that's like working for Brenner, like basically standing near to like Lucas home. This definitely my preference. So like I'm considering like it could not even follow Lucas. Most likely as like Lucas would using his compass would be trying to like would be eventually like I'm trying to enter into like Mustard Forest. Like at that point like Finn as well would be like totally following Lucas and Speaker based that is by Lucas. Definitely my preference. With like Lucas won't be finding out like the scenario that I'm going. But like I'm like eventually once like 11 would be saving Lucas. At that point I'm also trying maybe him maybe like from a distance, like him quickly charging in and trying to like maybe catch up 11. It's like a scenario that I think him maybe pointing to the weapon and maybe trying to like that way like trying to catch up 11. Like also like about the scenario that I'm also doing, but like 11 like so casual and easily using 11 superpower like basically uh him with like that backup using like 11's like superpower like I'm like in going unconscious like the scenario that I'm also doing. So like I'm also eventually according to my birthday preparation once like 11 that way as well as like Lucas would be like Lucas issues with like 11 that way we could be over and like so that Mike as well as like Dustin like eventually meeting like a cheerful Lucas as well as like 11 within like Northwood Forest. Like at that point I was going them all being cheerful and them more happily deciding to basically head back to like maybe like Micro's home. So like I'm maybe at that point like I'm like maybe like at that point I'm like maybe 11 and Lucas and all of them thinking that like that precise person who had basically followed after Lucas might have been actually following like 11 might have been like would be along the lines like maybe it was because of like him spotting 11 at some point and basically he might have been actually following 11 because of like 11 like issue in like the supermarket and everything like would be along the lines at that point maybe like Mike and everyone would be thinking at that point it's also like a sort scenario that I'm referring. So like I'm referring like Mike and also being cheerful and like them deciding to like and get alone back Mike and like all of them deciding to like head back towards like Mike's home. But like I'm referring like right as they will be getting even even nearing to like Mike's home itself and also different like 11's like telepathic powers like basically and like 11 being able to like send that basically at that point that maybe like I'm referring like 11 might at that point like recognize like someone who will be like standing in front of like Mike's home as like being like a part of Renault's team, like the scenario that I'm considering. For like using telepathy power, like 11 would be able to like read the mind as that person is also definitely my person so like that way 11 will be able to like know that basically like Renault's team that might have showed up in front of like my zone. So like at that point 11 telling and at that point 11 the friendship might have grown even more that 11 will be like even more free to like talk to like Mike Lucas and Dustin and all definitely so like 11 telling them that basically that like basically these are dangerous people that are after 11 like 11 such lines and I'm looking like Mike Lucas and Dustin deciding to like specific high 11. So like maybe at that point I'm considering like them deciding to like go back into Northwest Forest and maybe it might be at that point that I'm considering like uh, Mike Lucas and Dustin would be hiding 11 in Castle Fire and they are like the top of Will as well will be perfect. So like that way like Castle Fire be eventually becoming like for meeting spot where like they will be showing up every day secretly with that as well stealth and then my Lucas and the thing would be like each day would be like somehow in an extremely intelligent manner would be like brilliant manner would be like tricking like the spies that will be after like Mike Lucas and Dustin and like they would all be like meeting up in like Northwood Forest at like Castle Bias with like 11 possibly that being like the scenario and from there like them like continuing on with like their mission to like save him and all that it's like and we will go to the scenario that I'm also bringing up with the image.